Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to the Anime Fictions 2.0. Today, we're diving into part 3 of What If Naruto Konohas Lost Soul. One decision, one technique, and everything changes. If you enjoy alternate timelines and stories that push canon in unexpected directions, make sure to subscribe, share the video with your friends, and check out the other videos on the channel. And as always, drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading your ideas. Now, without any more delay, let's jump straight into the story. Chapter 27, Slug vs. Fox. Jinchiko groaned as she blearily opened her eyes. The bright lights of the hospital room pained her and caused her vision to blur, as she placed a hand to block out the harsh glare. I see you finally returned to the world of the living. She groaned and weakly turned her head, catching sight of the familiar figure in green. Guan? She questioned quietly. Where am I? In the hospital. I thought that would be obvious, he said as he stood and walked over to the table by her bedside. He poured water into a cup and gently lifted her head as he brought it to her lips. Drink, was his simple command. She complied, drinking the whole glass very quickly. Guan placed the cup back on the table and walked back to his seat. How did I get here? She asked after a few moments of silence. That Uzumaki boy was the one who brought you in. Apparently he managed to arrive just as you collapsed, he answered. She turned incredulously to him. What? But they sent 7 Umbu after him, she said incredulously. Guan nodded. Indeed, each of them were also part of our former Mizuki's personal guard. He looked at her then. And he escaped without a single injury. That's impossible, not even you could do that. The only person who would have a chance at doing that would be Kisame. Guan nodded. The boy is powerful, remarkably so. Possibly stronger than even Kisame ever could be. You've got to be kidding me? Kisame was the strongest ninja ever to grace Kiri since the Shodaime Mizuki. What could possibly make you think that? You would be quite impressed by the information one could gather by simply remaining in the shadows. He took a breath. He is apparently a Jinchuriki. What demon he houses I do not know. He was raised as a weapon from a very young age and took over the hidden leaf when the Sandaime Hokage died. He finished and stood as he began walking towards the door. Guan! Jinchiko called behind him, making him pause. I'm sorry, you and Hidetada never did get along, but he was still your brother and… Jinchiko. He interrupted firmly. Just tell me what were his final words. She closed her eyes and smiled somewhat sadly. He asked me to fulfill his dream, you know, that old one our sensei stuck in his head. Really? Guan asked as his interest piqued. Interesting. How so? She asked. I don't assume you know why this Jinchuriki wants Kiri for himself, do you? For our land and our navy, which now controls practically the entire Eastern Sea. That may be what he told you, but no, the real reason he wants Kiri is because he wishes to unify the land to conquer every hidden village. What? But that's ludicrous! She yelled, but winced as spasms of pain ran through her body. Do you know why he wants to do this? She didn't speak. It was the last request of the Sandaime Hokage. She scoffed. Last I heard, Sandaime was a peace-loving old man. Guess I heard wrong. Sandaime's last wish was to bring peace to the entire land. That stopped the woman cold, not just Konoha, or Kiri, but the entire land. He wants to end all of the wars. Guan paused. Therefore, in a way, serving this boy will help in fulfilling my brother's dream. He looked back over his shoulder at her. You can make your choice, whether to serve him, or defy him, but I think I've already made mine, Jinchiko. Meanwhile, Naruto sat in a meditative position in one of the many spare rooms of the Kage residence. After the Mizuki's death, it only took one day to subdue the entire village of Kiri. A few insurgents and loyalists to the old regime had been driven out and had taken up refuge in the surrounding marshlands, but Mika, Hinata and Shibi would deal with them soon enough. Now all he had to do was remain in the area for a few days to firmly secure his place in the seat of power. He would assign Kakashi and a few Umbu to be the overseers. Keeping a reputable Jounin presence here would work well to keep any power-hungry fool in line. He was broken out of his thoughts as soft thumps reached his ear. He looked to the side and saw a frog hopping towards him with a scroll on his back. A message from Jiraiya. The frog plopped itself down in front of him, untied the scroll from his back, placed it on the floor, waved once and poof. Was gone. Naruto blinked before he grabbed the scroll and unrolled it. So he drew. The slug and toad are coming to the mist. He paused for a moment, as if contemplating something. I wonder, Tsunade, what is it that you desire? It was 3 days later that Jiraiya and Tsunade finally arrived in Kiri. They could have arrived much sooner, but for some reason Tsunade had insisted on simply walking at a normal pace and taking plenty of rest. Every time Jiraiya questioned her, she simply said that it had been a while since she had come around these parts, and wanted to enjoy the scenery. When they finally arrived in Kiri, the two immediately noticed two things. Repairs were underway on many buildings and Hatake Kakashi was standing as the gate guard. You have got to be shitting me? Jiraiya and Tsunade muttered to themselves. It had merely been 5 weeks. There was no conceivable way that he could have subdued Kiri already. Ah, Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama. Kakashi greeted lazily as he waved, never removing his eye from his book. Naruto-sama has been expecting you. He spoke as he turned a page. Jiraiya nodded, still slightly dumbfounded. Ah, Kakashi, where is Naruto now? He should be in the tower, beginning his administrative duties. Jiraiya blinked with an expression of disbelief mixed with a kind of holy shit look before he turned to Tsunade. Well, let's get going, now's as good a time as any. She nodded, and the two remaining Sannin entered the village of Kiri. When Tsunade and Jiraiya entered the tower, they didn't even bother to speak to the administrative workers as they made a beeline for the strongest chakra source in the building. They entered the Mizuki's former office and found Naruto speaking to a large man wearing green robes. Very well, Guan. The man bowed his head once before he turned and walked past the Sannin. As he passed Tsunade, however, his eyes shifted. She looked at him from the corner of her eyes and caught his gaze. His gaze was completely blank as he walked past her without a single word. Ah, Jiraiya. Naruto's hollow voice brought her out of her muses. She turned her eyes onto him, blood-red robe and hood, armor as black as midnight and metallic face mask. His voice is dead, hollow and void of any emotion. His eyes hidden in as much shadow as the rest of his being. Her eyes narrowed. This was the man Jiraiya believed would bring peace to the world. She was brought out of her contemplation by Jiraiya's voice. And so, she agreed to come here and meet with you. I see. Naruto spoke as he turned to her. Well then, Tsunade, you wish to speak, so speak. She squared her shoulders. I would like some privacy for this conversation. Why don't we go someplace else? She seemed to think for a moment. As a matter of fact, I know the best place. You do? Jiraiya questioned. She smirked as she turned to him. You know the place too, Jiraiya. It's where we camped out during our first mission here. Ah, Jiraiya said as he remembered and nodded. Only one question, Tsunade. I was told you had an assistant, Shizen, was it? Where might she be? Tsunade shrugged. She didn't want to come, and decided to wait for me back at the village Jiraiya found us in. If I decide to join you, then I'll call her. Naruto paused and after a long moment nodded. Very well then, let us leave. The three walked through the village, watching as the people worked. Tsunade caught many looks of fear pass over the villagers' faces as they laid eyes on Naruto, as well as some looks of anger from others dressed in black garb, no doubt families burying their loved ones. She closed her eyes. The three continued their walk until finally they came to a clearing overlooking a small 10-foot rock face. Tsunade walked over to a tree which had 4 names carved into it. Jiraiya had done it. Jiraiya, Tsunade Orochi team and their sensei Sarutobi. Greatest ninja team ever. She closed her eyes and looked to the sky with a slightly pained expression on her features. How did it come to this? I remember that. Jiraiya's voice brought her out of her thoughts. She turned and looked at her teammate's bittersweet expression. She smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. Jiraiya sensed her tense and turned to look at her. He was cut off by her whisper. I'm sorry. He tried to pull back, but it was too late. She tightened her grip on him and spun him around so his back was facing her. She charged some chakra into her fingertips and taped the base of his neck before she delivered a solid kick to his ribs, sending the flying, crashing right into a tree. She closed her eyes and prayed that she hadn't hit too hard before she turned to look at the blonde Jinchuriki, who seemed as impassive as ever at Tsunade's actions. She sneered at that. Bastard probably doesn't even care. What is it that you desire from Tsunade? He questioned simply. She scoffed. To stop you and your idiocy right here and now. He shook his head as he unsheathed one of his swords. No, Tsunade, what is it that you truly desire? The desire hidden in the dark pit of your soul. Two figures leapt down from the rock face, revealing Akina and Shizen as they flanked the Jinchuriki, both bearing kunai and shuriken. Jiraiya struggled to stand, but that tap to the neck had completely messed up his nervous system and he couldn't move properly. Damn it, that's why she wanted to walk. She wanted for them to get here first and be ready to ambush him. I should have seen this coming. Naruto craned his head to look at Shizen. The woman held a determined gaze, but there was a definite underlying fear and nervousness. She may know what to do, but this was probably one of her first true combat experiences. He then turned to the other uninvited guest, Akina. The girl looked at him with a hatred he had not seen in any before her. Possibly even more than Sasuke's hatred for Itachi. It was then that he locked eyes with her, and time seemed to freeze as his eyes flashed red without his consent. Unbeknownst to anyone, Kyuubi smirked from behind the bars of his cage. Yes. He began chuckling then, at first slow and menacing, then blowing up into a mad laugh of bloodlusting glee. His red eyes glowed in the darkness of the seal. Soon, Naruto, soon I'll feel your bones crunching between my teeth. Once I'm done with you, not even the Shinigami will find the pieces. One who betrays must expect betrayal. Naruto spoke lazily before he snapped his fingers. A massive broadsword flew through the air, making both girls leap back to avoid it. Before the sword could hit a tree, an individual in green caught the blade by the hilt. Guan, you deal with those two, I will deal with Tsunade. The bearded man nodded before he adjusted his grip on the blade and began walking towards Shizen and Akina. The blonde girl appeared to want to go after Naruto, but held herself back in favor of helping Shizen. Naruto walked forward as his sword glinted in the flickering sunlight that filtered down through the tree tops. Red chakra pooled at his feet and encased his form in its fiery embrace as his eyes glowed a deep red beneath his hood. If my death is what you desire, Tsunade, then you'll have to come and take it. She sneered at him. I don't know if you can even be called a man or if you really are a demon anymore, Uzumaki. But even if you are a demon, it doesn't matter, I'll do whatever I have to do to stop this ambition of yours here and now. Naruto stopped and felt an unfamiliar feeling of anger bubbling in his chest. For some reason, being called a demon irritated him. For what reason, he did not know. People had said it, both in and out of the battlefield, for as long as he could remember. He never cared then, why should he now? He then remembered Hidetada. That gripping pain in his chest as he stared at his unmoving form. Perhaps that was why. Because before, he cared for nothing, he could kill, maim, murder, it didn't matter. But now for the first time in his life he had felt guilt, true guilt over his actions. Demons did not feel guilt, therefore, he could not be one. He looked into her eyes, his blood-red orb seemingly piercing her. I'll let you in on a secret, Tsunade Uzumaki. Naruto is nothing but a man. And with that quiet declaration the blonde rushed the slug. Chapter 28, Awakening. Tsunade reared her fist back and with a display of her superhuman strength she punched Naruto's incoming sword, shattering it into a million pieces. Naruto took it in stride as he used the swing to gain momentum to spin around and deliver a roundhouse kick to the slug. Tsunade blocked the kick with one arm and pushed him off. Naruto, who had been moving in a clockwise motion, now moved counterclockwise. He brought his foot down harshly, digging it into the gravel to stop his momentum as he charged a fist with so much chakra it glowed with blue flames as he slammed it into her gut, using the momentum to add to the impact. Tsunade felt the air leave her lungs painfully quick, but held her ground and delivered her own punch to the boy's face. Naruto quickly moved an arm to block as best he could, but she broke through his defense like a wrecking ball through plaster as she hit his jaw dead on the spot. Naruto flew through the air several dozen yards and through a tree before he was able to right himself in mid-air and land on the next tree with his legs. The wood groaned against the pressure of his impact. He used the tree to jump, bounding over the tree tops as he formed his hand seals. before he cupped his hands in front of his face and breathed out a massive stream of flames towards the woman. Tsunade reared back her fist and punched the ground. The shockwave of her fist made the earth rise in front of her in massive spikes which blocked the flames. When the orange glow died down indicating the attack had finished, she kicked each earth spike/shield, sending them flying towards the airborne Jinchuriki. Naruto unsheathed his last blade and began swinging, sending multiple wind blades to cut the stones into small pebbles before they even reached him. As the last stone approached him, he used his wind chakra to spin him around, giving him momentum as he kicked the stone back to her, only to have it shatter into a million pieces as Tsunade reared back her fist and punched it. Ha! It was Shizen's cry as she appeared behind the man in green, coming down with a brutal axe kick to the junction of his neck and collarbone. Guan took the blow without so much as a flinch before he grabbed the girl by her ankle and swung her around, slamming her into Akina, who had been approaching his side, intent on stabbing him in the ribs with a kunai. Both girls were sent flying back and skidded to a stop. When they looked back, Guan had finished swinging his sword in an upward strike, dragging it across the ground, leaving a jagged trench in its wake. When the swing was completed, a blue streak of lightning continued its path, forking across the ground towards the two females as it tore the earth apart from the force. Move! Shizen yelled as she kicked Akina away and leapt up just in time to avoid the attack. Akina, though slightly shocked by her sudden movement, recovered quickly and rolled in order to get to her feet. She wasted no time and formed her hand seals. Katon, Ryuka! She yelled, releasing multiple fireballs towards the green-clad shinobi. Guan placed his broadsword in front of him and began spinning it with one hand. It got faster and faster, and when the fireballs finally reached him, the speed and wind created by the blades simply dispersed the flames like candle lights. He ended the spin, falling in a defensive stance, grasping the hilt with both hands as the tip of the sword angled towards the floor in front of him. Akina growled, the sound coming out strangely animalistic for a human, before she took out two kunai and rushed him. Guan waited for her to be in range before he swung his blade horizontally. She fell flat on her back and skidded across the ground, avoiding the blade and trying to kick his feet out from under him. Guan leapt over her in a cartwheel motion. Akina dug her hands into the soil, stopping herself, and then did a perfect backflip while her back was to him, using just the strength of her arm, in an attempt to kick the Kiri swordsman. Guan blocked both her legs above his head with his forearm and then delivered his own kick, this one headed for the girl's chest since she was upside down. Akina placed her free arm in the way in time for it to take the brunt of the attack. The attack still sent her rolling forward, coming to a stop as she slammed harshly into a tree trunk. Guan turned and placed his sword in the way of several samban Shizen had launched from a hidden device in her sleeve. One look at them and he could tell they were poisoned. He removed the blade from his field of vision in time to see Shizen's foot before it connected solidly with his face. He fell back and placed his free hand on the ground. He heaved himself up and kicked Shizen in the chest, sending her staggering back and using her to gain enough momentum to back-flip to his feet. He then turned, swinging his sword in an arc to his other opponent who had recovered. Akina used two kunai to block the strike as best she could but was still sent stumbling back. Guan turned again to face Shizen, swinging his sword again. Shizen stepped into the swing, wrapped her arm around his, holding him in place, and delivered a brutal headbutt, knocking the Kiri swordsman into a daze just as Akina moved in and stabbed his forearm, making his grip on his sword slacken enough for her to yank it out. Shizen formed a chakra scalpel in her hand and reared it back in preparation to cut the man's heart. Guan recovered from his daze and caught her wrist in time to stop her. He raised his leg and kicked her off of him. Akina held Guan's massive sword with both hands, struggling to even lift the damn thing. The blasted hunk of metal weighed a ton to her. Just why the hell did these bastards have to carry weapons that were so heavy? Shizen spoke to her. You know fire, right? At Akina's nod, she continued. Good, take the sword somewhere and melt it. We can't afford to have him get it back, and you're no good with that heavy thing weighing you down. I'll hold him off. Akina looked like she was ready to protest, but a glare from Shizen made her nod and rush off as fast as she could to get some distance between herself and Guan. Shizen looked back to the large man and took her fighting stance. It was the standard medic taijutsu stance, strong offense when used in conjunction with chakra scalpel, but weak defense. Guan recognized the stance and retaliated by taking his own offensive stance. Do not make me fight you, girl. I do not wish to kill you. Shizen didn't say anything before she formed her hand seals. Dokujiri, she yelled before releasing a huge cloud of poison that blanketed the area. Naruto grunted in pain as his back was slammed against one of the trees. He craned his head to the right just in time to avoid Tsunade's fist, letting it hit the tree and promptly topple it over. Naruto wasted no time and delivered punches to her stomach in rapid succession, followed by an uppercut which snapped the woman's head up, leaving her chest wide open. He reared back his left gauntlet-covered hand, forming a bright sphere of swirling chakra. Tsunade, still dazed by the hits, couldn't properly defend herself before he slammed the Rasengan right into her chest, sending her flying back, spinning with the same motion of the sphere before she hit the floor, skipping over it like a pebble over the surface of a lake before her back slammed harshly against the rock face with a sickening crunch. She fell to the ground on her hands and knees, one arm clutching her chest as she hacked up torrents of blood. She wheezed when she breathed, the sound coming out strained, strangled, and painful. Naruto was almost certain she would die shortly. Until the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead pulsed and purple seals formed all around her body, Naruto could hear the bones snapping back into place, and hear as organs, flesh, tendons, and tissue repaired itself nearly instantly. The slug stood, green chakra forming a hazy mist all around her. She placed her hands in the seal and spoke. Initial gate. Kai. As she yelled out the last word, her muscles seemed to expand for a moment before compressing back to their normal size. She then formed another seal. Naruto, knowing that he had to stop this now, before she did any more, drew on the Kyuubi's chakra and rushed forward at incredible speeds. Heal gate. Kai. Her chakra instantly seemed to replenish itself, and go beyond what she had even started with. Naruto unsheathed his blade and pushed wind chakra into it as he cupped his free hand in front of his face mask, his eyes turning red as he began to call on more of the fox's chakra. Life gate Kai. Katon, Zugoku, she yelled, releasing the third gate as Naruto blew out a stream of flames which was immediately combined with the wind chakra in his blade. Her skin turned red and her chakra output nearly quadrupled. Her hair whipped around her wildly, undoing itself from its normal pigtails as she dug her fist into the ground and lifted it up, again using the earth as a shield to block out the flames. She leapt away just as the ground she had been using as a shield exploded as Naruto tore through it like rice paper. 2 claws of red chakra rushed out of the dust and debris. They grabbed her roughly by the shoulders and began to burn her terribly, only for her to replace herself with a log. Naruto spun around in time to dodge Tsunade's axe kick. He stumbled as the earth shook and gave way beneath him as her foot connected. Tsunade took the opportunity it presented. Grabbing him by the collar of his cloak, she reared her fist and punched the blonde Jinchuriki as hard as she possibly could. Pieces of his cloak were torn off and gripped firmly between her fingers as the blonde was sent flying, slamming into the rock face hard enough to have it crumble on top of him in a small landslide. Everything was silent for a moment before Tsunade heard a deep growl as red light could be seen between the cracks of the earth piled over the Jinchuriki. The very earth began to shake and Tsunade felt a brief moment of fear before she smothered it completely. She rushed forward, intent on killing the boy before he could finish whatever he had planned. She didn't get more than 2 steps before hundreds of red chakra claws exploded from the ground all around her. They rose into the air, going far beyond the trees before they came crashing down on her like a great tidal wave of bloodlusting power. Tsunade dodged as best she could, using her enhanced speed to help her, but even she couldn't keep up with it, and soon received 3 gashes from her left shoulder to her right hip as one of the claws slashed her. Then another slashed her across her back, then another and another. The slashes healed almost as quickly as they appeared, but they still caused terrible pain even after they were healed. When the chakra claws ceased their slashing and instead formed into one huge mass which began burning her while she did the only thing she could think of. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. A massive cloud of smoke blanketed the entire forest, and the next thing that was seen was a massive slug. Tsunade gasped in relief. Tsunade-heim. The slug spoke in her state. Are you all right? Tsunade didn't have time to answer before another cry was heard. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Another smoke cloud, this time revealing Manda. The slug seemed to hiss out the name like a cursed poison. Katsuyu. Manda snarled and then looked at his summoner, who stood atop his head, only this time, his cloak was missing from his shoulders, revealing his bright blonde hair as his red eyes glared at the medic with as much contempt as he could muster. Two flaming red tails of chakra thrashed behind him. Naruto looked at the snake and spoke. I want them in pieces. Manda smirked. He was going to enjoy this. Shizen charged the shinobi. As she got in range, she attempted a spin kick only for Guan to duck under it with ease. She then followed it up with a sweep kick, but he dodged that one as well. She would have attacked again, if the air hadn't left her lungs as the man slammed the back of his fist into her ribs with an air of effortlessness about him. Shizen uncharacteristically cursed before she attempted to backhand him in the face. He caught her fist and twisted her arm behind her back. Shizen craned her neck back to be face to face with the older ninja. Guan barely had time to catch her smirk before Fukumikuchihari. The green-clad man screamed and punched her hard in the face as 3 small needles stabbed his left eye. He fell to one knee and held one hand over his eye as it bled freely. Shizen smirked, wiping some blood from the corner of her mouth as she stood. Those needles weren't poison due to the danger of having them hidden in her mouth, but they had served their purpose. She moved fast and charged the larger man, coming in with a flurry of kicks and punches. Guan couldn't defend properly due to the fact that his eyes naturally tried to follow her movements, causing him even greater pain as the needles scraped against the inside of his socket. Shizen then broke through his guard and used a chakra scalpel to cut the tendons in his left arm. With a cry of rage, the older man took out a kunai and with speed brought on by pain and anger he plunged it into her stomach, causing the woman to stop and cough blood. Before she could do anything, he left the kunai in her stomach and then kicked it in deeper, burying it up to the hilt and making her fall onto her back as she coughed up more blood. Guan again fell to one knee. He took out another kunai and looked at it with one good eye. He looked momentarily torn before his features hardened. Shizen watched in horrified fascination as the man plunged the kunai into his own eye and cut it out. Blood sprayed everywhere. It fell down the left side of his face freely, caking his beard in the red liquid as it pooled at his feet. She got to her knees and with a forceful pull took out the kunai from her stomach. She groaned as she threw the bloody weapon away and took deep breaths in an attempt to help concentrate on healing the injury. Guan also took deep breaths as he began tearing off some of his robes, and used them as a makeshift bandage to cover his eye. Finally, after almost a minute of regaining his composure, he stood and began walking over to Shizen's prone form, who was almost done with her healing, but not quite finished. He stopped in front of her and stared into her eyes. They held fear, but also determination and anger, both things necessary for a ninja. Not bad, young one, he admitted before he kicked her. Shizen managed to cross her arms in front of her in time to block the attack, but was still thrown back several feet by the force of his blow. Guan moved to step forward again before something crashed into his side, nearly tackling him to the ground. He regained his bearings in time to see the snarling features of the other girl. He leaned his head to the right, dodging her fist, which held a surprising amount of force, before he lifted his leg, placed it on her stomach and chest, and pushed her off. He stood and watched as the girl righted herself in mid-air and landed, her form hunched over as her hair covered her eyes. He could tell that something had changed about her. Katsuyu's form seemed to bulge for a moment before she released a huge stream of acid towards the snake, hitting it dead on. When the snake's melting form could be seen clearly, it revealed nothing but its shed skin. Manda exploded from the earth behind the slug, wrapping itself around it, only to have Katsuya separate into hundreds of other, smaller slugs and reform out of its grip. As the slugs reformed, Naruto realized Tsunade isn't on her head. He barely turned around in time to see Tsunade's form as she ran up Manda's back, heading straight towards him. He ducked under her fist, then placed his right shoulder against her stomach and grabbed her extended fist with his left hand. He flipped her over his shoulder, sending her clear off Manda's head. He did not, however, expect her to grab his collar and pull him down with her, sending them both spiraling down to the forest floor. Both were snarling as they continued exchanging fists and kicks in mid-air. Each block and impact hurt both of them. Such close proximity was burning Tsunade terribly. At this rate, her seal of rebirth would only last for about another 2 minutes or so. And each blow Naruto blocked would still break the bones in his arms, only to have them heal in seconds due to the fox's chakra. The only difference between them was that his source of healing was virtually endless. While hers had a limit, he would outlast her, then he would kill her. Not again was the mantra the young blonde-haired girl chanted in her head as exchanged attacks with Kiri Shinobi. She swerved to the left to avoid a downward swing he delivered with his kunai. She extended her left arm and placed it over his neck in a headlock which made him arch back. Then she took her right arm and wrapped it around his extended arm so his elbow was against her rib cage. She then pulled, hoping to break his arm. Guan grunted and grit his teeth as he fought against her hold, then using a burst of chakra he broke free, elbowing her in the stomach and then backhanding her in the face, sending her sprawling. She hit the floor hard but rolled to her feet. She snarled on all fours as she glared at him, and then let her eyes travel to the falling figure of Naruto as he fought with Tsunade. "I won't let you win again," was her silent promise as she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they had changed from her clear blue to a deep crimson red with an animalistic slit. Naruto caught Tsunade's fist and reared his claws back, ready to tear her apart, but suddenly he felt pain, deep burning pain, as if he had unleashed 4 tails of Kyuubi's chakra. The red chakra shivered and seemed to fade for a moment before it exploded everywhere, changing from a focused 2 tails to a hazy cloud of red chakra. Naruto bit back a scream of pain. Tsunade again seized the opportunity and reared back her fist, punching him again and sending him flying down to the earth. He flipped in mid-air and landed on all fours. A massive dust cloud picked up in his wake. He tried to stand but fell to one knee and gripped his stomach, over the area where the seal was. He hissed in pain. Gritting his teeth, he opened a single eye and for the first time in a long time, felt true surprise. There in front of him was the girl Tsunade had called Akina, hunched over like an animal, a single red chakra tail whipping behind her. Above her, the head of a fox formed from the chakra. It looked straight at him, piercing his red eyes with its own before it smiled darkly. Chapter 29, Kyuubi's Deception. Naruto openly stared at the sight. It had to be a trick, some kind of illusion or ninjutsu or something. There was no possible way that he could be seeing this. He moved to stand, but a pulsing pain from the seal on his stomach stopped him. He felt a rush, and when he opened his eyes again he found himself standing in front of Kitsun's cage, a sight that he hadn't seen in many years. But the sight that greeted him was even more surprising than the view of the outside world. The doors to the seal were open, albeit slightly, but still open nonetheless. Within the cage Naruto could see a massive pool or lake of red chakra as it glowed fiercely. But he couldn't see the fox. Looking for something? Naruto turned and took a step back in true, genuine fear as a red fox the size of a very large horse grinned at him before it lunged forward and bit his shoulder. Naruto closed his eyes, waiting for the pain, but when none came he opened his eyes, revealing that the fox was actually clamping down on his shoulder, but not injuring him. The fox chuckled at his expression of wariness before it pulled back and began circling him. "Don't worry, fool boy, I cannot harm you for now at least." "How are you out of your prison?" Naruto asked Kitsune, his hand resting on the sword at his side. The smirked, its pearl-white fangs glinting evilly. "That would be your doing, fool boy. Well, you and that girl." Naruto glared at him. "What have you done?" he snarled as his eyes flashed red. The legendary demon smirked. "I have decided to take my leave of this dull, boring place and go into my second prison." "Second prison?" Naruto repeated angrily. The fox sneered at him, placing his face right in front of the blonde. "You did not seriously believe that one lonesome child barely out of his mother's womb could hold my full power back, did you? Don't flatter yourself, boy. That yondaime of yours could never hope to design a seal strong enough to have a child survive receiving my near-limitless chakra." "He split your power in two," Naruto said, quickly deducing what the kitsune was getting at. The fox's smile was almost prideful yet somehow hateful all the same. "That he did, my consciousness, and 5 tails of my power into you, and 4 tails into her." Naruto was quiet for a long moment before he snarled and grabbed the kitsune by the front of his throat. Kyuubi growled. At this point he couldn't harm his vessel, but the blonde could apparently harm him. The legendary beast could practically feel Naruto's smirk as he spoke in a smug tone. "It matters not that you curse the creature. From what I can tell, this part of you is just your consciousness, and that," he said, jerking his head to the pool of red chakra still within the cage, "is still your 5 tails of power trapped in the seal. I still have all your strength, so go to her. Go to the foolish girl. I'll be glad to rid the world of both of you. At this the QB smirked and chuckled, the dark foreboding sound still as chilling as ever. Ah, but here lies Yandame's one true folly. He paused as he laughed again. He designed both seals with the intent that nothing would ever change. But one thing will change now, the location of my conscious mind. Naruto's narrowed eyes could tell he was not going to enjoy this. Yandame designed your seal with my self-preservation instincts in mind. He knew that I would not want to die, and so knew that I would always do my best to control the damage my chakra did to your body, in order to preserve my own life. However, now that I will no longer be here, your body will experience the full damage the use of my chakra will undoubtedly provide you with. Naruto narrowed his eyes and then tore out Kitsun's throat, only to have him burst into red mist and reform a few feet away. Oh, but Naruto, there is so much more to this. It chuckled. The girl's seal is designed differently, she pulls out less chakra than what you would normally do, but the damage is automatically filtered by her seal. But now, with my entering her seal, I can refine the chakra even further, making it do even less damage than what it used to do to you. She will have my power while you will experience more pain than what you could ever imagine calling just one tail. Naruto glowered at the kitsune, his form shaking in rage as he glared with all the hate he could muster. Kyuubi smirked. Then, when I use her to kill you, the chakra in this seal will automatically seek me out, entering her, and thus killing her, releasing me from her seal, since it was never meant to bind my spirit. While your seal is. Therefore the seal not hers would take me to the afterlife with you. Why did you not do this sooner? You could have easily escaped the seal any time, if this was always the situation. Still so very astute. Kyuubi smirked. That blasted sand aim hit her well, so well that not even I could sense her, but when you attacked those Hyuga you two crossed paths, her close proximity to both you and my chakra awoke the chakra I had within her. She has been a beacon ever since, I just needed to wait for her rage to get the better of her. Now then, my boy. He gave a mock bow as his form began to fade. I take my leave of you, he said, chuckling at his enraged eyes. Naruto immediately found himself in the outside world and snarled, his eyes practically glowing crimson before he attempted to suppress the fox's chakra, only for the burning pain around his seal to intensify nearly 10 times over. He realized that the blasted fox did indeed make it easier to control. He grit his teeth and tried as hard as he could to suppress the chakra, barely managing to drop it from 2 tails to a single tail's worth. He groaned but ignored the pain as best he could. He only had 1 tail worth of the fox's chakra but felt as if he was getting 3 tails worth of pain. He snarled and rolled back his sleeve and saw to his great displeasure, to put it mildly, that damage was being done faster than what it could be healed. He hissed when his metal gauntlets and face mask began to burn. He removed them quickly, letting them drop with a hiss to the grassy floor where they continued to let out smoke. He clutched his head in pain. The chakra fought ravenously against the seal. It held strong, but the pain was almost unbearable. It felt as if his entire body had been dipped in molten steel. He tried to suppress the chakra again, but it fought back with a viciousness he had rarely encountered before with anyone or anything he had faced. Tsunade landed, and looked to her blonde companion in silent shock before she forced herself to snap out of it. She could ask questions later. She turned back to her opponent, who was now getting to his feet. She rushed him, never once hesitating in her stride. Naruto turned at the sound of her footsteps. He ignored the intense pain of Kyuubi's chakra and got to his feet. He blocked her attacks as best he could, but the pain was impossible to ignore even for him. Tsunade's assault was relentless, but he managed to hold his ground just barely. Finally he found an opening in her assault, and unsheathed his last remaining sword and slashed the woman across the stomach. It began to heal, but just then the purple seals that covered her faded and receded back into the diamond on her forehead. She faltered for a moment, and Naruto took the opportunity and formed another Rasengan in his hand, but with Kyuubi's chakra interfering he couldn't fully complete the last stage and instead slammed an imperfect Rasengan into her stomach. Tsunade skidded back several yards before coming to a stop, numerous lacerations covering her arms, legs, upper torso, all giving a spiral-like design around one gaping hole in her stomach. She fell to her knees and coughed up blood. She gritted her teeth and focused her healing chakra. Naruto moved to attack, but suddenly his chakra flared up. The Kyuubi's chakra had sensed the blood and was now fighting against the seal. It spiked to the point where it would have been the equivalent to 3 tails once more. The haze of red chakra around him was now a massive fog-like cloud. A vicious blood-curdling roar of pain escaped his throat as he fell to his knees in agony. He looked to his uncovered hand and saw the skin practically falling away, revealing muscle and tissue beneath. The chakra was going to kill him before Tsunade could. He tried to stand but only succeeded in getting to one knee. Blood seeped from his mouth, eyes and ears, dripping to the floor. He snarled through his teeth and stood as he glared at Tsunade. The woman panted as her healing was finally done and looked into his blood-red eyes. Even now, blood-covered and consumed in red chakra as he was, she could see the message in his gaze clearly. I will not fail. You will not stop me. Akina growled as she saw Naruto exchange blows with Tsunade. She rushed forward intent on attacking him as well when a fist hit her right across the jaw, knocking her down to the floor. She rolled once and got back to her feet. She snarled at the now one-eyed man as he took his stance, holding his one good arm in front of him. Your opponent is me. He spoke with a cold, hard gaze. She snarled before she rushed him, her clawed hands slashing with animalistic fervor. Her attacks were wild and crazed. Her speed had nearly quadrupled from what it was, and the wild nature of her attacks was making it increasingly difficult to block or dodge. Finally, she overextended herself, and the Kirinin grabbed her wrist before he heaved her over his shoulder and slammed her into the ground. He didn't release his grip and began spinning round and round until he finally released her, tossing her into a tree. As she stood, he saw her eyes flash, and a faint glow came from beneath her clothing around her stomach before she extended her claw, and the red chakra claw shot out towards him. He was surprised but managed to swerve out of the way in time to avoid it, only to see the claw sink itself into a tree a few yards behind him. It groaned in protest. He snapped his head back to the girl but turned it back to the tree and felt his remaining eye go wide as the tree was now coming towards him, the claw dragging it back. He practically dropped to the floor, narrowly avoiding it as it passed overhead. He then rolled to the side just as she slammed the tree down where he was like a giant, bushy club. Inside of her mind her thoughts were slowly shifting. Where before her thoughts were of stopping Naruto or Guan from hurting Shizen and Tsunade, now they merely craved for blood. A sinister voice spoke to her, asking her to give in, to feel the warm blood of her enemies flow through her fingers, and feel it as it ran down her throat. From his new and hopefully temporary residence, the QB smirked. He couldn't give her any more power with the restrictive seal she held, but it was enough for now. Soon he would weaken the seal enough so she could use all 4 of the tails she held in her. Then, he would destroy that blasted boy. He formed his hand seals as best he could with his injured arm. It hurt terribly, and only through the use of chakra did he even manage to move it in time. Luckily, his finger muscles worked fine, otherwise he would have been in a lot of trouble. The green-clad man exploded from the ground right in front of her. Her eyes widened for a brief moment before she slashed at him with her free claw. Her claws screeched against his chest armor, the heavy plating managing to deflect the blow if only just. He moved with impressive speeds, and before the girl could do much more than scream, he stabbed her 4 times in her upper torso, with one slash across her hip, where her artery was located, and another slash to her left arm, no doubt causing nerve damage. She growled as she fell to her knees, seething as she gritted her teeth. Her blood flowed freely, pooling at her feet before the injuries healed. She looked to let her eyes travel to the man who now stood above her with a kunai raised ready to kill her. She glared defiantly into his remaining eye. Before he could bring his blade down on her, Shizen ran up behind him and locked her arm with his, stopping him cold. Akina's eyes flashed before she delivered an upward swing with her claws, which this time did cut through the armor and left 3 long gashes along his chest. They weren't deep, but they did hurt. He then kicked the blonde girl in the chest, using her to push back and land on top of Shizen. He rolled back, managing to escape her grip, and got to his feet before he kicked her in the ribs, sending her skidding across the ground. He then raised his forearm above his head, blocking Akina's downward strike. He then swerved to the right to avoid her follow-up before he elbowed her in the stomach. She stumbled back and sneered before she rushed him again. Her form is little more than a blur of red. Guan took up his fighting stance again, but before the girl reached him, a blur of white appeared in front of him and nailed her right in the face, knocking her down next to Shizen. Guan looked and found that it was the man Naruto had called Jiraiya, one of the Sannin he noted. The silver-haired Sannin's movements were jerky and uncalculated, meaning that he was still recovering from whatever Tsunade had done to him. Jiraiya turned to him. You deal with Shizen, I'll stop this one. Guan nodded as he eyed the dark-haired woman as she stood. Tsunade grunted in pain as she was thrown harshly against a tree. She couldn't even move before he was upon her, snarling, slashing, and kicking. She could barely keep up, and every now and then some of his attacks would get through, covering her in numerous slashes. His attacks, before, were powerful and refined, a routine he had done numerous times, and it showed. But now, his attacks were almost desperate, wild and untamed. He truly looked like the demon many thought him to be. Finally, the woman had enough and elbowed the three behind her, knocking it down, and leapt back. She took to the trees, Naruto close behind her. She then leapt down and with a flying kick, tore down another tree which she quickly grabbed and used it as a bat, sending Naruto flying back, over the tree tops. The Jinchuriki snarled before he extended his right hand. Snakes came from the sleeve and grabbed one of the overhead branches. He pulled himself back like a slingshot. His left claw reared. Tsunade sighed in relief but snapped her head up as she heard the breaking of branches and rustling of leaves, just in time to see Naruto explode from the top of the trees, a trail of red chakra behind him. She reared back the tree in her hands and threw it to him like a spear, only to have the blonde extend the snakes in his wrist to pull himself above the tree's path. He ran along the side of the massive projectile before he lunged at her again. She rolled to the side to avoid a claw swipe. It left 3 jagged claw marks on the ground in its wake. She moved to kick him, but the blonde grabbed her leg. He skidded a few inches in the ground but dug his heels in and took the hit. She gaped at him. She didn't even hear his bones crack as they had done with the few other times he had been forced to block her hits. He snarled before he twisted her leg harshly, and didn't stop until he heard her scream of anger and pain and the snapping of bones. Tsunade turned and placed her hands on the ground before spinning around completely, and kicked the back of the blonde's head, sending him tumbling forward. Naruto snarled as he got to his feet. The slug had already reset the bone back into place, and was applying her healing chakra on it when he rushed her again. Tsunade waited for him to get close and stood. She used her broken foot and kicked him in the throat. The blonde coughed and heaved, but Tsunade took this chance to get some distance between the two of them. He snarled and ran after her, ignoring the pain that shot up his legs from his bones and protesting muscles. His chakra flared up again, nearly making him stumble from his perch, but he caught himself and did his best to ignore the pain. He caught sight of the slug. Her leg had apparently broken again. He lunged at her, intending on killing her once and for all so he could concentrate on suppressing this wild chakra. But when he had already closed half the distance between them, she turned, the sword he had dropped when his chakra had first flared firmly in her hand. He tried to change his trajectory with his wind chakra, but again the Kyuubi's chakra, combined with the pain, made it near impossible, and he was only able to change his trajectory so that she would run the blade through his right shoulder instead of his heart. His claws flashed before she felt a searing pain against her abdomen. Her blood seeped through his clawed fingers and down his right arm. She was amazed that he could still use it with the sword through his shoulder, but she did her best to avert her eyes from the sight. She reared her fist back and brought it down on his head. Naruto used his other arm to block and felt his knees buckle as her monstrous strength made itself known again. A scream of pain was heard off to the sidelines, and the two immediately snapped their heads in the direction in time to see the last of the Kyuubi's chakra dissipate from around Akina as Jiraiya held his hand against her stomach, apparently having used a 5-point seal. Tsunade cursed as she saw Shizen was losing her fight with the injured Miss Nin badly. One of her arms appeared to be broken, and she was favoring her right leg. She reared her leg back and swung with all her might. Naruto tried to put up a defense, but her attack broke through with ease and nailed him right in the jaw, sending him flying back. "Shizen!" Tsunade called as she ran towards them. The dark-haired medic blew out some more poison gas, making Guan back off to avoid it before she ran, both women heading towards their last comrade. Jiraiya formed his hand seals to form his swamp of the underworld technique. Tsunade, seeing her ex-teammate's intentions, leaned down and picked up a large stone, not even slowing down in her run before she threw it at him. Jiraiya narrowly avoided the attack, but the 2-second diversion was enough for Tsunade to dive for the girl, placing a hand on her shoulder as Shizen gripped Tsunade's other hand. Tsunade and Jiraiya's eyes met. She noticed something. The pervert was holding the last hand seal. She met his eyes again for the briefest of instants, a silent thank you on her lips before they vanished in a swirl of leaves. Jiraiya stared at the spot the three females had vanished for a few seconds before he heard another scream, one of rage and pain. He turned and felt his eyes go wide as he saw Naruto on his knees clutching the seal as red chakra floated all around him. He couldn't see many injuries, but the fact that the boy had screamed at all was cause of worry. Both he and Guan rushed to the boy's side. Jiraiya skidded to a halt next to him. "Naruto, what's wrong?" The blonde grabbed him by the throat as his eyes flashed red. He looked to the silver-haired man and snarled through the pain. "The seal cut off the chakra." Jiraiya, knowing now was time to question the boy, pushed him onto his back, cut open his shirt and formed his hand seals. "Gojio Fuin!" he yelled, slamming his seal over the existing one. Immediately the red chakra receded and Naruto visibly relaxed. His entire body was covered in second and third-degree burns. Guan was the one who spoke up. "That chakra the girl used is similar to yours, what happened?" Naruto stood ignoring the pain and spoke. "I will explain later, but first, Jiraiya, I need you to fix my seal. Guan, gather a team, I want those three found. You have 2 days." He spoke before he straightened and began making his way back to the village, promising that the next time he met the slug, or the girl that traveled with her, he would take great pleasure in removing their heads from their shoulders. Chapter 30, The Tsuchikage and Reikage. 2 weeks since his encounter with the slug. The blonde Jinchuriki was now sorting through various files in his office. They held the name and picture of every ninja in Konoha's records from Chunin and below. He had returned to Konoha just a week after the encounter, practically storming through the halls in silent fury. He left Kakashi, Shibi and Kurenai there and simply told them to handle the situation as they saw fit. Shino and Hinata had returned with him, and Jiraiya. He gave another angry look at the gold bracers now wrapped around the wrists of his gauntlets. Jiraiya had given them to him just a few days after he arrived back in Konoha, and he explained the apparent workings of this seal. "From what you explained to me about what's happening with the seal, this is probably the best solution I can come up with." Naruto looked at the golden bands before he picked one up and examined it. "What does it do?" he questioned, turning his eyes onto him. "Wipe your blood over it and focus your chakra," he said simply. Naruto removed one of his gauntlets, cut his finger over the edges of the other, wiped it on the gold band and focused his chakra. The blood over the 2 gold wrist bracers was immediately absorbed into 5 individual seals on each band, making 10 in total. These are basically chakra blockers of sorts. They'll hold back the Kyuubi's chakra enough so it doesn't hurt you, but not enough to mess up your chakra control. He paused for a moment before he continued. Each seal can also be released at any time. You just need to wipe your blood over one of the seals and say Kai in order to do so. Removing 2 of the seals should be equivalent to 1 tail, but I truly don't recommend you using it. Since you were unable to do anything about the damaging effects of the chakra, weren't you? Naruto said, quickly deducing the reason for the man's warnings. Jiraiya sighed and shook his head. "No, I don't know of any seal that could suppress the damage demon chakra causes to a human body. Minato obviously knew of one based on what the Kyuubi told you, since that's apparently what he did with the girl. But as you know, all of his research and the Hiraishin scroll were destroyed in the fire of his home caused by the fox." Naruto nodded and looked at the gold wristbands. "So in essence, unless I bring back the Kyuubi's conscious mind into the seal and find a way to keep him in there, then the chakra will always be unstable when I use it." Jiraiya nodded. "Yeah." He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "It's turned now into a double-edged sword. The physical boosts are still as impressive, if not more so without the Kyuubi's restrictions, but the pain and long-term damage it can cause can make you lose the fight anyway." Naruto looked pensive for a moment before he snapped the wristbands on his gauntlets. "Remove the 5-point seal," he ordered. Jiraiya nodded as both ninjas stood. He formed his hand seals, letting the blue flames glow on the tips of his fingers for a moment before he slammed them into Naruto's stomach. The boy grunted and straightened as he felt the small traces of Kyuubi's chakra once again begin to flow through his system. Still, he could tell that the chakra in him was much wilder than before. It didn't cause him pain, but it was still a constant, harsh reminder that he now had to guard enemies from both outside and within himself. He stood before turning to Jiraiya. "Now I want you to personally search through Sarutobi-sama's personal records. Whatever happened, he most likely did not want me or anyone else to find it. You are the only person currently alive who is better at seals than he was. Find me something." he ground out as he glared at the white-haired ninja with cold blue eyes. Jiraiya nodded before he turned and left the office. Naruto sighed and rubbed his head. Throwing the folder onto the desk, he leaned back in his chair. He was getting a migraine, something he almost never did get. He looked out the window to view the village of Konoha. There was still a tension in the air, something heavy and oppressive. He sighed again before he donned his cloak and mask and made his way out the door. He needed a walk or something to clear his head. Akina's eyes subtly shifted from the back of Tsunade's head to the floor. A tense silence was oppressive around the three of them. Tsunade hadn't even spoken to her. Shizen would send looks of both pity, suspicion, and a little bit of fear every now and then. She scarcely remembered the fight. She remembered fighting against the guy in green. Guan she remembered was his name. Then she had taken the sword and gone to destroy the thing, but decided to hide it instead since it would take way too much chakra to melt the thing, and had rushed back. Then she remembered seeing him standing over Shizen after that. Some things started becoming hazy for her. She remembered being angry and having attacked him. Then she remembered red almost like fire and a dark voice telling her, calling for blood, telling her to destroy everything, then nothing. She had woken up to an interrogation. She groaned as she sat up from her laying position, rubbing her sore head. She didn't have time to even open her eyes before she felt someone wrap an arm around her collar and jerked her to her feet before slamming her against a wooden wall. "Tsunade-sama!" She heard Shizen's startled voice. She opened her eyes only to find Tsunade's angry brown glaring at her. What she began but stopped as Tsunade slammed her against the wall again, knocking the wind right out of her. "Shut up!" Tsunade commanded as she narrowed her eyes. "I'm the one that's going to be asking questions," she growled. "Now I want the whole truth. Just what the fuck was that back there?" She shifted under the woman's grip uncomfortably. "I don't remember," she gasped out as her grip tightened around her collar, beginning to cut off her air supply. Tsunade narrowed her eyes before she turned the girl around and struck a point in the back of her head, followed by 2 more points at her temples and 2 more at her forehead and the base of her neck. "Now tell me, what was it that you did to get that chakra yesterday?" "I don't know what you're talking about," the young girl said again as she struggled in her grip. Tsunade's eyes again narrowed. She had pressed 3 points, which would make it damn near impossible for a non-medic to lie, and she doubted that Kyubi could interfere, with the seal Jiraiya had placed on her to block it out. "What day were you born?" she questioned. "October 15th. Just 5 days after the Kyubi attack? This is too convenient. She does fit the right age, I wonder." Before Akina could fully understand what the hell was wrong with the older blonde woman, Tsunade dropped her and turned sharply on her heel. "Come on, both of you, we're going to go see an old friend of mine." Akina regained herself before she straightened and looked to the back of the slug Sannin's head. "Wait, just what the hell was that all about?" Tsunade didn't say anything before she exited the hut. Shizen spared the younger girl a look of sympathy before she turned to follow her mentor. Akina looked down to the floor before she straightened and began following the 2 medics. That was just over a week ago, and still Tsunade wouldn't speak to her. It was quickly getting on her nerves, but something told her to hold her tongue and be patient. She looked back at Tsunade as she walked ahead of them. She didn't understand, but she hoped that the slug would start talking soon. This accusing silence was driving her nuts. "Are you certain of that?" came the voice of the newly elected Kazekage as he rounded back onto the form of his messengers. His brother Kankuro and his sister Tamari flanked him as he addressed the man. "There is no doubt about it," the ninja spoke as he bowed. "Kiri has somehow been conquered by Konoha. Hatake Kakashi, Aburame Shibi, and Yuhi Kurenai are acting as Jounin commanders for the region. The fact that they have not declared a Kage is clear reason to believe that the 3 are still loyal to Konoha." Gaara placed a hand to his chin in thought. His eyes were wide with disbelief, yet one could see the cogs of his mind moving to evaluate the situation. "This makes no sense. How could anyone conquer a nation overnight without even a hint of knowledge reaching us beforehand?" Baki spoke up as he too began to see the implications of what this could mean. If this Uzumaki boy could conquer Kiri, weakened as it was, this quickly, then he must be extremely powerful. Anyone with that kind of power shouldn't be taken lightly. If he chose to attack Suna next, then they might very well be conquered. Gaara began pacing around for a while. Kuri was a land that almost every nation had set their eyes on. Nearly 20 years of civil war had practically bled them white, and everyone realized that with the way things were going, by the end of it Kuri would barely have enough strength to stand on its own 2 feet, let alone fend off another village like Suna, Iwa, Konoha, or Kumo. But that meant that at this very moment Kumo and Iwa were most likely receiving word as well, and knowing their fierce hatred for Konoha, the 2 nations would no doubt jump at the chance to attack the Leaf Village. But he was not about to make the mistake of underestimating Konohas again. If he was able to take an entire nation right from under the noses of not 1, but 3 hidden villages, then there was a chance that he would also win against Kumo and Iwa if they even chose to combine forces. If he joined Konoha, then there was little doubt Konoha would win. If he joined Iwa and Kumo, then there was absolutely no chance in the 7 hells that Konohas could prevail. He didn't care how strong he was. But then that would open the door wide for Iwa and Kumo, either of which was friends with Suna, especially Iwa. And with their military weakened from the failed attack on Konoha. The village elders must be informed, assembled the council. He stated, for he knew that this was one decision that he could never make on his own, it was a decision that carried the fate of their whole world. My lord, came the general response as they bowed and left to gather the elders. Village of Iwagakure, Tsuchikage residence. Many jounins laughed around a table. A celebration of some sort was being held. It appeared to be something small, nothing too extravagant considering the location it was being held in. Hey, look at Tohisa. One man said as he gestured to the partygoers. There were about 50 to 60 people all around the area, including men, women and children of all ages, both ninja and civilian alike, as they laughed and enjoyed themselves in a general sense. They seem to be happy here, don't they? Why don't you join them? You've had your eye set on that Futaba girl for a while now. She's not talking to anyone at the moment, so now's your chance. The man that spoke was Yoshihiro Shimazu, codenamed Tsuchikage of Iwagakure. He was quite large, almost 6 feet, or at least 5'11" with Shuza's build. He was in his mid to late 50s but appeared to be in his early 40s, only his gray hair revealed his age. It was cropped back in a loose ponytail. He had tan skin with an almost reddish hue. He sported a handlebar mustache. The man he had called Tohisa laughed nervously as he scratched the back of his head somewhat sheepishly, a blush staining his cheeks. He was an ordinary-looking young man, black hair, gentle look, slim build and a kind smile. He could be no older than 20. Uncle, please, he whispered in embarrassment. Yoshihiro barked out a laugh, the sound coming out gruff yet like that of an old friend sharing a joke. Boy, let me tell you, in a world like ours you only have one chance at everything. So stop beating around the bush and go. The young man sighed before he smiled and got up. He began making his way to the crowd but paused as he noticed his uncle wasn't following him. Uncle, you're not coming? Yoshihiro dismissed him with a wave of his hand. No, this kind of setting isn't for me. I do it for you young guns. My place is on the battlefield, that's the only place for me. His nephew sighed tiredly. Always have to be the devil, Shimazu? The older man smiled before he stood. I'll show you a real devil if you don't hurry up. Tohisa smirked before he made his way through the crowd, soon vanishing among the mass. Yoshihiro smirked before he turned and left the main hall, into another room of the manor. All right, what is it now? He spoke without even pausing in his stride. An umbu appeared next to him, already keeping pace. My lord Yoshihiro, there is some news that might interest you. He started handing the man a scroll. Yoshihiro took it and unrolled the document. He read over it before a smile formed on his features and he tossed the scroll back. Double the patrols around our borders and assign men to start building up our defenses. The Iwa umbu bowed. As you wish, Tsuchikage-sama, he stated before vanishing in a puff of smoke. Yoshihiro slid open the screen door at the end of the hallway and entered the candle-lit room before he closed the door behind him. Inside was a thick set of purple armor. A large battle axe was held above it on a stand. He walked over and fingered the armor. Satisfaction comes first, he muttered before smirking. It looks like you and I will be going into battle again. I can't wait. I'll make sure Konoha remembers the name of Devil Shimazu, he said to himself with an amused chuckle before he turned and left the room. Village of Kumogakure, Reikage residence. I see. Thank you, you may go, came the calm voice of a man with white robes who sat with his knees bent under him as he calmly sipped his tea. The messenger bowed once before he turned and left the room as requested. The man currently sipping his tea wore white robes, simple yet elegant. Long raven black hair went down to his lower back. He had a neatly trimmed mustache and goatee and a calm, placid look, yet somehow held an underlying warmth to it. On the shoulders of his robes held the symbols of yin and yang. He wore a simple black headband which kept his hair out of his eyes. The man continued to sip his tea, apparently unaffected by the news his messenger had brought. I know that look. A voice came behind him. He turned, looking over his shoulder. He caught sight of a woman. She had shoulder-length brown hair, held together by a gold headpiece. It resembled a crown but was designed to look like a falcon. She had green eyes which spoke of experience, both on and off the battlefield, as well as great intelligence. Whatever do you mean, my lovely wife? He questioned calmly as he stood and turned to walk past her to the garden outside. The woman huffed in mild annoyance. I mean that you have barely even heard whatever you heard 3 seconds ago, and you're already up to your tiresome tricks again. Let us not forget, my dear Ewing, that it's these so-called tiresome tricks that brought us together in the first place. Zhuge Liangji spoke in that dangerous tone only wives can use effectively. I am warning you that you will be very displeased if I continue my actions, which despite your protest I will. Therefore your warnings are a moot point. She glared for a moment before she huffed airily and left the black-haired man to his own devices. The newly named Zhuge calmly walked over to a koi pond and began feeding the brightly colored fish. Now then, Uzumaki Naruto. What will your next move be, I wonder? It was many hours later, in the dead of night, that said blonde Jinchuriki was again sitting at his office shifting through files. He was finally on his last one. But as he reached the final page, it proved that this too held no information of this mystery girl. He growled, the sound escaping him before he could rein it in. 177 files, over 6,000 papers, nearly 200 genins graduated in the last decade or so, and not one goddamned clue on who, in the 7 fiery hells of the earth, this girl was. He was broken from his thoughts as the door to his office opened, revealing a very nervous-looking toad hermit, holding a single thin file under his arm. His cold blue eyes traveled up to his. You found something? He nodded, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. Oh yeah, I found something, he muttered, tossing the file on the desk. A bright red sticker which read classified was on the top. Naruto also noticed several seals written over the file. 8 in total, some even he didn't know about. No doubt Sarutobi had wanted to keep this girl a well-guarded secret. Who only Jiraiya, if anyone, could discover. He had succeeded. He opened the file, revealing a picture of the girl, smiling. Name, Rogazetsu Akina. Rank, Genin, graduated at age 10. Date of birth, October 10th. Biological parents, deceased. Legal guardians Rogazetsu Nobutsu, Rogazetsu Yuriko. Relation, daughter by legal adoption. Status of parents or guardians, ninja on paid leave. Current ninja status, Genin on reserves list. Biological relatives still alive, brother. She has a brother? He mused before he looked at the name written next to it. Jiraiya only had time to hear sounds of paper sliding onto the floor before. What? Chapter 31 The Truth. Jiraiya licked his dry lips as Naruto snapped his eyes to meet him. Jiraiya could see them glowing faintly beneath the hood, flashing from blue to faint purple as the gold bracers on his wrist hissed and glowed with the seals as they struggled to hold back the chakra within him. The blonde visibly reined in his temper before he continued. I want an explanation, Jiraiya. The toad hermit sighed, half in relief that the blonde had calmed down and half to prepare himself for the upcoming explanation. He searched in his kabuki robes and removed an old brown book, the pages worn with age. This is Sensei's diary. He explained here that, when your father sealed the demon into you, he also sealed it into Akina, or more specifically, your twin sister. He paused as he saw Naruto's shoulder tense, and a small growl reached his ears. He obviously needed to explain how Erasure defeated Kyuubi. Many in the council were seasoned shinobi, all familiar with the legends of the Bijou. They would never believe that any used by just one man other than a sealing technique could have stopped him. However, since he knew that there was a very real possibility that they would not follow Arashi's last wish, he decided that since you were the firstborn, as well as the one who held the majority of Kyuubi's power and also the one that most had seen, that he would present you as the sole container for the demon. When he realized that they would indeed ignore Arashi's last wish, he sent her away with 2 of his most trusted ninja, programmed a new identity and date of birth 5 days after the Kyuubi attack, along with a new social security, birth records, everything. He made sure that absolutely no one but himself and the 2 ninja he assigned as her parents would ever know about her being the second container. Her adopted parents trained her. She graduated at 9, as you saw in the profile, and was placed on the reserve list since no team could take her in without throwing the balance off. She attempted her first Chunin exam just 6 months before you, Hinata and Sasuke took yours and apparently made it to the finals. She was going to pass, but Sarutobi pulled it back at the last minute, not wanting her to have to take on Chunin-level missions before she was absolutely ready. Her sensei didn't nominate her for the next Chunin exam, so she did not take it with you and your team. Well, you already know the rest. He finished. A heavy silence filled the room, and the Toad Sage could practically hear the cogs in Naruto's mind clicking into place. Finally, he saw the blonde straighten and school his features, obscured by the mask as they were. Though Jiraiya could still see the seals on his wristbands glowing faintly, indicating that he was still very much angry. The Toad Hermit stared straight into Naruto's eyes. "What will you do?" he asked somewhat nervously. "This changes nothing. She dies." He spoke simply as he walked around the Toad Hermit and began leaving the office. "You would kill her? Even now, after you know who she truly is?" The Toad Hermit questioned, waver in his voice as he hesitated. Naruto paused before he passed through the door and looked back over his shoulder at the white-haired ninja. "Jiraiya," he spoke slowly, "I have not come this far by bowing down to the whims of conscience. I suggest you get used to that," he said before he turned and walked out of the office, the wooden door closing shut behind him. Sunagakure, Council Chamber. The council chamber of Sunagakure could only be described by one word at this moment: chaos. Various yells and shouts of nearly 200 councilmen created an orchestra just right for a migraine and sore throat. As expected, news of Kiri's apparent conquest had caught everyone off guard, and most as soon as Shinobi Council had been thrown into panic. There was a division between 3: attack, an alliance, and neutrality. Many in the council who favored taking down Konoha's Jinchuriki immediately made valid points. That they could defeat him now while he was still within military, economic, and tactically sound fields was the main and most important point. Of course, things were never that simple. That course of action was very risky. If they did attack now, after their recent loss in the short Otosuna-Konoha War, then there was a definite, almost certain chance that they would lose if IWA or Kumo did not attack with them. Privately, Gaara himself was hesitant to attack the Konoha. He had spared his life after all. There was a debt between them, and he had little doubt as to who would lose in that fight as well. Konoha's demon was simply beyond his skill right now. The other option, an alliance, was foolish, because then Naruto would take advantage of that alliance and request their assistance in his wars, thus weakening them, and in the long run, if he defeated Kumo and IWA, would be able to seize Suna as well. And if he was beaten by Kumo and IWA, Suna would be on the losing side. A lose-lose situation no matter what. The final option, neutrality, was meant to wait and see if both Kumo and IWA attacked Konoha. That way, with Suna's involvement, the Leaf would lose for certain. While this might seem the safest course, this plan also held a great risk if he was able to conquer either Kumo or IWA like he conquered Kiri, practically from one day to the next. Then Suna would have no choice other than to surrender. Still, this would be an act of war. It was not something for a Kage to choose on his own. The young Kazekage side, this was a horrible situation. The whole nation was at this point on the very edge of a power struggle that could escalate into the largest war this world had ever witnessed. And all because of one Jinchuriki. Training Ground 22. Guan entered the training field and found Jinchiko. Her back was to him as she practiced her kata with her blade. Bandages were still wrapped around her, and small stains of red could be seen on them, as well as her heavy breathing. All indications that she should not be out of the hospital. He walked behind her, intent on ceasing her training before she injured herself further. She suddenly spun around, sword already swinging. But he had been expecting it, having seen the kata many times over. So he calmly brought up his arm, which held a small metal arm bracer which he used to block her blade with a loud resounding clang of steel against steel. She gasped, and the unexpected resistance nearly knocked the blade right out of her grip. Gugwan? What in the… I believe, he interrupted calmly as he lowered his arm, that you were not due for your release from the medical ward for at least another week. She scoffed, as she fixed her grip on the sword again. I can't stay there, I'll lose my mind. Now if you, what the hell happened to your eye? She asked, only now noticing the new patch covering the wound. He raised his hand and absently rubbed the spot around his eye. 2 talented girls, I was careless, and they were stronger than I anticipated. She looked at him incredulously for a moment before she spoke. It's not like you to underestimate anyone. She then shrugged before she turned to leave again. Jinchiko. Guan called her retreating form. Have you decided on your allegiance in this war? Have you? She questioned a little harshly. There was a pause that Guan did not bother to break, waiting for her to eventually fill the silence. Are you really going to stay with him? Guan nodded. Yes, he spoke solemnly yet fiercely. She took a deep breath as she looked up to the sky. Then I suppose I'm with him too then. She then turned and smirked at him. After all, someone has to make sure you don't lose your last eye. She taunted before walking off. Guan smirked before he made his leave in the opposite direction. And as he made his way through the village that they had been fighting for so fiercely, he could not help but recall his brother. Hidetada, my brother. Though I may have failed you in life, I swear I will do everything within my power to fulfill your dream in your stead. Mika growled as she lazily tossed kunai, hitting the bull's-eye repeatedly with a hard thunk sound as she pulled the kunai back with a wire. Unite the land, that's no good, then I can't kill anymore. Thunk. If he unites the land, then the chaos will end. Thunk. And if the chaos ends? Thunk. Then my fun ends. Thunk. And we can't have that now, can we? Sunagakure, Market District. Inuzuka Kiba promptly spit out the contents in his mouth, which consisted of a fried eel, rice, and some green peppers all over one Naro Shikamaru as he rounded on the Suna Kunoichi sitting next to him. What? Are you serious? Temari nodded, ignoring Shikamaru's indignant sputtering as he wiped all the crap that had landed on him. Yes, supposedly, that guy's already conquered Kiri. Gaara's meeting right now with the council to decide on what course of action we should take. Isn't it obvious? He yelled, standing up, catching the attention of the other patrons. You need to go and kick his ass now that he's weak. Kiba! Shikamaru cut in sternly. There are a lot of risks with that plan. If we were to attack now, then Iwa, who is also a rival of Suna, would simply wait it out for us to destroy each other, and then would take both territories with little resistance. If we were to wait for Kumo or Iwa to make a move, then we also risk being consumed in the power vacuum that would occur upon Konoha's defeat, and because of Suna's recent defeat during the Chunin exam, we barely have the numbers to take on a fully functional village like Kumo, and Iwa attacking him at all could lead to Suna's downfall. And even though I want that guy dead as much as you, I'm not willing to destroy Suna in order to get it. Kiba and Temari both stared at Shikamaru, one in anger yet accepting that he was correct, the other in slight amazement. He had analyzed the situation, and had explained some risks that even she and Gaara hadn't thought of. Temari sighed before she stood. Look, as of right now this is top secret, no one knows about it, I just told you out of courtesy. Tell your friends, but make sure they don't tell anyone else. As of now, Suna could be moving to war very, very soon. Konoha, Market District. Iyu came the slurred voice of the female member of the Sound 4. She was currently dead drunk and hanging off the arm of one of her teammates, namely the bone user Kimimaro, who could apparently handle his sake much better than she could. The 5 were currently sitting in a little ramen stand named Ichiraku Ramen. Meanwhile, Jirobu and Kidamaru were staring at this unbelievable sight in almost slack-jawed fascination. Hey Kidamaru. Yeah, Jirobu? A slight pause which was broken by Tayuya giggling like a little schoolgirl. What am I seeing? I don't know, Jirobu, I just don't know. Sakan blinked several times as he stared at the bottle of sake as if it was a new form of poison or a miracle cure. Damn, this shit must be good, he muttered before he began chugging it down like his life depended on it. Kimimaro eyed the girl clinging to him and shrugged. They do say sake makes one act strange. Tayuya giggled and suddenly appeared between two severely freaked out Jirobu and Kidamaru as she placed her arms around them. You are the team Mathis any Kuni Kumo ninja girl could ask for. She slurred as she smiled up at them, not noticing, or perhaps simply oblivious to the terror-ridden expressions on their faces. She giggled and looked over out of the stand. She looked but then pointed and happily squealed. Look, it's the creepy guy with the mask. The other 4 occupants craned their heads back in order to see who she was pointing at. When they did, they each paled to some degree and turned back around very fast. Jirobu, Kidamaru and Sakan went as far to hide behind the menu while Kimimaro settled for simply sipping his sake. Ichiraku walked out from the back room, wanting to see what all the commotion was about. What he found was one drunk Kunoichi, a somewhat nervous-looking Kimimaro and 3 very nervous-looking idiots hiding behind one menu sheet. He then looked out and found the source of their nervousness. It was a cloaked individual wearing a metal face mask. Ichiraku couldn't see his face, but he didn't have to. The slight sag of shoulders, heavy steps with no destination, resolutely staring ahead and nowhere else, and the invisible weight he appeared to be carrying on his back told him that this was a person with a lot on his mind. So without further ado he spoke. Hey buddy! He yelled, making Naruto and the, currently coherent, members of the Sound 4 Air 5 swivel their heads to look at him. With the attention of his target firmly set on him, he waved him over. You look like you got problems, a good bowl of ramen will do you some good. I do not believe that will be necessary, Naruto replied before he began walking away again. Come on! Ichiraku called again. First one's on me? You look like someone who has not had ramen in a long while. It'll do you some good. He grinned. Naruto paused in his stride and looked to the sky. How long had it been since he had ramen? Had he ever had it, he couldn't remember. Ichiraku couldn't help but smile as the cloaked individual turned towards the shop. The entire Sound team just wanted to melt into the wall and floor at the moment. It was a healthy respect they had for this individual, as well as a good amount of fear since he single-handedly wiped out the Hyuga clan. Orochimaru had often said that the Hyuga clan was the only thing in Konoha that was any real threat to him. To defeat more than half of them on your own was nothing short of monstrous. So they were obviously less than pleased when Tayuya giggled, giving away their position as Naruto entered the stand. He looked to them, his blue eyes faintly shining beneath his hood as they reflected the light that got to them. He gave them a nod before he continued his walk to one of the stools and sat down. It was soon after that Naruto found a full and steaming bowl of ramen in front of him. He silently lowered his hood and began removing his face mask. The Sound 5 watched with almost bated breath. Even Tayuya seemed to have sobered up. They had never really seen his face, only a brief glimpse of his blonde hair when they had been waiting on the roof of the council room for the planned overthrow of said council. Finally he removed his mask and set it down on the bar. While Tayuya had to stop herself from outwardly gaping at his features, her comrades could only notice one thing. He's younger than all of us. He snapped his chopsticks and took a bite. He swallowed and then looked at the grinning Ichiraku. This, he spoke slowly, is very good. Ichiraku only chuckled in response. Naruto's small moment of peace was broken, however, as a Chunin entered the stand. Naruto-sama. A messenger has arrived from the Northwest Garrison. He says it is urgent. Naruto nodded before he stood and put his mask back on. He placed some money on the counter but was stopped by the chef. Hey, I said the first one's in the house. Tell you what, take a rain check and come by next time, there'll be a bowl here waiting for ya. Naruto slowly nodded and placed his money back in his pocket before he followed the Chunin back to the Hokage Tower. Chapter 32, Assemble the Army. The conquest of Kuri was an event that would be marked forever in the history of the shinobi nations. Yet it also marked the move of Konoha's rivals. In Kumo, increased activity along its southern borders, indicating their raising of defenses. In IWA, the decrease of high-ranking missions, indicating that they were calling back all of their high-level ninja in preparation for an all-out war. In Suna, civil unrest was erupting throughout the entire village, which could quickly lead to downright pandemonium. However, one group was not so subtle in their movements. Barely 2 weeks after the news of Kiri's conquest spread, an army gathers to the west, and without any warning, launches a vicious assault on one of Konoha's western border guard bases. The border garrison is destroyed, letting this army enter freely into Konoha territory. I see. Naruto spoke as the scout finished delivering the report to him. It was around midnight. The doctors and nurses soon led him away to recuperate. Naruto turned to another of his Chunin messengers. Tell Umbu Squads 5 and 8 that they are to go and investigate this army. What village are they from and who's leading them? Also bring me Marino Ibiki, Midorishi Enko, Jiraiya of the Sannin, Mado Guy and the sound team. I want them in my office within the hour. The man bowed and immediately rushed off to complete his assigned duties. Naruto began mentally counting off the list of possible enemies. That area is accessible only to IWA, and Suna if they cross the Ijuo River. Kusa and Aim are also near that area, with Taki being just a bit further west. Would have to cross through IWA in order to get to that pass, so it is highly unlikely that they would attack from that direction. Snow would also have to pass through IWA. So that only leaves IWA and Suna that can gather an army the size of that man's report. With that thought in mind, Naruto left the hospital and began making his way to the tower. Sure enough, exactly 1 hour later Naruto found himself facing the Toad Hermit, the 2 top ninja in the torture and interrogation department, Konoha's Green Beast and the 5 Sound Ninja. The 8 ninja kept their silence, even Taiuya, who had sobered up considerably on the way there. Naruto leaned back in his seat as he pulled back his hood, revealing his blonde hair to everyone currently in the room. I would get right down to business. Yesterday at 3 a.m. one of our border garrisons was destroyed by an unknown army. Judging by the size of this force, and the difficult supply routes they need to secure, I would say they are possibly 1 week away at most. At this news the air in the room grew heavy with tension as they processed the implications of this news. Now your assignments are simple. Ibiki Enko. I realize that it has been some time since you have seen active duty, more than Enko Ibiki. However, we are somewhat short-handed at the moment. Therefore, you 3 along with you 5, he said, gesturing to the sound of 5. Will lead our forces. Everyone was taken aback by that statement, and looked at each other questioningly. Ibiki was the one to break the silence. But Naruto-sama, isn't the Hokage supposed to lead the army? And unless I am mistaken, last time I checked, you were the leader of the village, thus the Hokage. The scarred man stated calmly yet still somewhat incredulously. Naruto nodded. That is true, and I will be leading the army. However, the 8 of you will each be leading squads. I will lead you. Ibiki then looked at the Sound 5. Lord, no offense meant to the former Sound Ninja, but aren't there stronger, more experienced individuals that you could give the post as important as squad commander? Taiuya growled, rounding on the scarred man. You got something to say, you scar-faced piece of shit? She snarled. Jirobu and Kidamaru leaned in and began whispering to each other. What happened to the I love you guys thing? Kidamaru shrugged. I don't know. Before Taiuya could keep running her mouth off, Kimimaro broke in. Taiuya, silence. He cut in, stopping her tirade mid-sentence. He is right. Compared to many shinobi, we are considerably weaker than them, even with our cursed seals. Taiuya was about to go off again when Naruto held up his hand in silence. He then calmly passed his eyes over the people in front of him. While he is right, there are stronger individuals I can give the post to. You 5 will lead the squad for another reason entirely. Ibiki suddenly had a look of realization dawn on his face. I see you wish to lower the tension between the Konoha ninja and the newly recruited ninja from Oto. Naruto nodded. Precisely, there is a clear division between the ranks. It is unacceptable. Having 5 ninja from Oto assist in this upcoming battle will help to bridge that gap, and will prove fortuitous in the long run. Jiraiya spoke up next. So why am I here? He questioned as he straightened, crossing his arms for emphasis. Naruto locked gazes with the Toad Hermit. My attention will be on this strange army. You must contact your spy network and keep a close eye on all of the major villages, Kumo, Suna and IWA. If the army we are facing turns out to be from one of those villages, then disregard spying on that particular village and instead focus on Kiri. I wish to make sure the situation there is stable. Regardless of who is leading the enemy, however, you are to send a message requesting a relief force to Kiri. Tell them they are to send men. Immediately, I also wish for you to keep up the search for your old teammate. Understood? Jiraiya nodded before he silently turned and jumped out the balcony. Naruto then turned back to his other subordinates. Now gather your teams, we march to war soon. With a nod, they each turned and walked out the room. Kumogakure, Reikage residence. The Yondaime Reikage could be found sitting in his vast library, reading over one of the many scrolls in his expansive collection. Around him, scrolls and books of all kinds numbered in the hundreds, perhaps even early thousands. Around the walls were also various weapons of all kinds, everything from nunchaku to naginata. Next to him, a young girl with pale blonde hair, possibly in her late teens or early 20s, was sitting next to him, reading over one of the scrolls as well. She sighed and looked at him with a mixture of pleading, annoyance, and childish anger. Master, why do you have me do this every week? It is so boring. Zhuge Liang calmly continued to unroll the scroll in front of him as he traced over the kanji. One must be strong in both mind and body, Yujito. As my apprentice, I believe I have taught you such. She sighed irritably. Yes, master, but for all you have taught me how to read, that isn't making it any easier to land a decent hit on you. As I said, Yujito, one must be strong in both mind and body. If you do not have both, then you will never defeat me or replace me one day. Then with little preamble he stood, and the hour bell rang a second later. Now then, Yujito, your studies are over for today. I suggest you go and get ready. We will be having guests soon. Guests? She questioned with a raised eyebrow as she struggled to catch her breath. Guests from where? Just then a messenger walked in. My lord, the gate guards say that. Yes, I know, you may go, thank you. He interrupted, dismissing the confused messenger. Now, Yujito, don't you need to get cleaned up? He asked in a tone which was calm but practically dripping with so much smugness that she could nearly feel the smirk on his lips. Yujito growled in annoyance. She had given up long ago on trying to discover how this man apparently knew everything before it even happened. That didn't mean she had to like it. Are you at least going to tell me who it is that's visiting? Just an old acquaintance. He replied simply as he sat down on his desk again and continued reading over his scroll. Cryptic bastard. She ground out through her teeth as she turned and walked out the door. Konohagakure, outskirts. 3:34 a.m. Naruto awoke to the sound of someone frantically knocking on his estate's main door. He slowly stood up and got dressed before he walked out. Finding his Umbu scouts. Report. He commanded. Umbu bowed his head before he spoke. My lord, the enemy army is calling themselves the Anti-Fire Coalition. They are formed through an alliance between the villages of Kusaime and Taki. They are led by the Tree village leaders Kenpachi Zuroku, Yoshino Megumi, and Zaraki Ketsu. Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. Kenpachi Zuroku and Yoshino Megumi, you say? Umbu nodded at his question. Aim, Kusa and Taki all had a fierce rivalry against each other for the central marshlands. If Kumo or IWA got word that they had united to fight against him. Contact Ibiki, Enko, Gai, and Kimimaro, Taiya, Jirobu, Kidamaru, and Sakan informed them that they are to have their teams ready by tomorrow at dusk. The three Umbu scouts bowed again. Yes, sir. They chorused before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto snarled as he closed the door. Yoshino Kenpachi. They dared. They dared to stand against him? Him? He was there when Kusa had been at war with Aim and Taki. It was because of his assistance that Aim and Taki were able to achieve their independence from the more powerful nation of Kusa, who had been close to seizing the western marshlands entirely, thus becoming the sixth great shinobi nation. And now those two. Kenpachi Zuroku and Yoshino Megumi. He spat out the names with anger. You two have a debt to repay. I will now take payment for it in full. He snarled as his eyes flashed red in the darkness, and his braces glowed fiercely. Fire Territory, War Camp of the Kusaime Taki Coalition. Inside a rather spacious tent, a man wearing a modified Umbu uniform with a green dragon mask sat at the head of a decent-sized table, over which a map of Fire Country was sprawled over it. Wrapped tightly around his arm was a Kusa headband. Two more individuals entered. One was a rather large man. He was bald but had a well-groomed beard and mustache. He was at least 6-7 Buddhist prayer beads were laced between the fingers of his right hand. He wore gold and black robes with the design of a tiger facing off against a dragon on his back, with the taki symbol between them. Next to him was a young girl. She was very petite, barely reaching 5 feet, with long black hair that reached just a little lower than her back and blue eyes. She wore a simple uniform. Only exception was the vest was cut a little shorter so it left her stomach exposed. Around her neck was the AIM headband. The dragon-masked ninja nodded in greeting and the other two returned his nod as they sat down. Good, you're both here now, I believe we should, the dragon-masked shinobi began but was cut off by the young woman. If I may, Lord Zaraki, this was reckless. When we created this alliance it was under the agreement that we would each defend our borders from an outside invasion from Konoha. It was not for you to all but hand drag us into a conflict by invading them. The larger man spoke. The dragon-masked Umbu snarled. If you two fools wish to roll over and let him plow through your lands first, then go ahead. I however won't stand for this upstart of a child telling me what to do in my own home. Nor will I see my land, the one closest to Konoha mind you, be damn near burned before your villages can act. You have done what I needed to, he said, standing up. And what's happened cannot be changed. We are on our course. You both know that, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Now seeing you two is somewhat uncomfortable. Let us postpone this meeting until tomorrow morning. That said, Zaraki exited the tent with an irritated air about him. Kenpachi sighed through his nostrils. That fool doesn't know what he's gotten us into. The young woman looked down to her lap. Lord Kenpachi, you do realize that this is betrayal, not only to Konoha, who has been our ally for years, but to the Uzumaki child himself. Kenpachi nodded, fingering the prayer beads in his hand. He sighed before speaking. Yes, I know, however he stood, his towering form looming over her smaller form. We have no choice, we must fight now. Konoha will not allow for a slaughtered garrison to go unanswered. Lord Zaraki is correct in his words, Lady Yoshino. The woman, Yoshino, nodded uneasily as she stood. Yes, I need to rest, I bid you good night, Lord Kenpachi. She bowed once before she walked out of the tent. Kenpachi fingered the prayer beads again. Chapter 33, The Sleeping Dragon. All right, Liang, what is this about? Came the voice of Yuing, wife of the Godame Reikage, as she entered his library where he still sat reading over yet another scroll. She swore he just did it to appear more educated than what he already was. He had probably read all the books in here 3 times each. You will see soon enough, my dear, he replied calmly, though she could practically feel the smirk on his lips. Duga Ma Song Liang. She growled his full name through her clenched teeth. She loved her husband to death, but the man could be so infuriating at times. I was in the middle of enjoying lunch with my students, who I have not seen for over 3 months, when your messenger arrived. Now, dear husband, I want an explanation. He held his hand up, and then began counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. He looked at her, a sly smirk tugging at his lips as he spoke one simple word. Duck. Her instincts kicked in, and she did just that, barely avoiding one of the Kumo chunins as the man was quite literally thrown through the wall behind her, where he landed at the foot of Liang's desk. I told you I'll see him now. A pissed-off female voice came from the hall, one which both Ying and Liang recognized with ease. Liang cleared his throat and rolled up the scroll, setting it aside. I would welcome you into my home, but I believe you have more than adequately done so yourself already. Isn't that right? Tsunade of the Sannin. As the dust settled, it revealed none other than the legendary medic as she stepped into the newly made door, 2 other women following shortly behind her. Liang allowed his eyes to travel to Shizen, and then they finally settled on Akena. Only his wife noticed the slow, dangerous smirk that crossed his features. Fire Country Territory, Leaf War Encampment. Naruto sat at the head of a rectangular table. Ibiki was sitting to his right, with 8 other empty seats along the length of it. To Ibiki, the silence was heavy. It wasn't because he was frightened of Naruto well much anyway, but because he could tell the boy was very, very angry. More so than any other time he had seen him. So, being the interrogator, Ibiki decided to do what he did best: interrogate. Naruto-sama. He paused as he watched Naruto turn towards him. You seem agitated. And even if I am Ibiki, what in the world would make you believe I would share the reasons for my agitation with you? Ibiki paused. That was blunt, evasive. Whatever was bothering him was not just professional, it was personal. Because I am the only one who has bothered to ask. Naruto conceded that point. Ibiki watched him for any kind of reaction, a twitch of a finger, flashing eyes, growls, anything. But nothing came from him. Naruto, however, allowed his mind to wander. He remembered, back on the marshes of the Morocco plains, it would be 4 years ago and 3 weeks since that time. Oh yes, he remembered that day well. The day of his very first battle. It was cold. He could hear the sounds of battle ahead as his men, a contingent of 30 Umbu, followed silently behind him, the mask shining in the dim light that broke through the gray clouds overhead as they let the rain fall heavily on them. He could see the battle taking place long before any of the others. The sickly green waters of the marsh sloshing at their feet as the thin fog settled around them, the rotting trees and groaning wood, providing little cover from the shuriken and kunai being thrown by both sides as they clashed. The blood mixed freely with the water at their feet, turning it into a brownish quagmire instead. He could see several of the Aim and Taki ninja beginning to flee, believing the battle to be lost. However, only 2 remained. They stood amidst the center of the chaos. The first was a large man, wielding an even larger Naginata polearm. The second was a young woman, possibly no older than 17, wielding 2 chain whips. The older man swung his weapon in a wide arc, sending a wind blade into the crowd, and then blocked the strikes from those near him. The girl behind him was twirling the chains in her hands, the bare edges of its slitting throats and slashing arteries with pinpoint precision. Soon, however, they were pushed back against each other, back to back as the Kusanins circled them. The larger man looked over his shoulder at her. Yoshino Dano. He spoke calmly. This battle is lost, make your escape. I will hold them here. The younger woman snorted as she smiled in resignation. It is no use, Kenpachi-sama. We're surrounded. She spoke simply. However, the sound of breaking wood, before a tree branch fell, brought their attention upwards, to the sight of a masked Konoha Umbu. Ninja of Taki and Aim, Konoha at your service. As the words were spoken, Konoha ninja seemed to appear from the mist all around them, leaping through the humid air as kunai and shuriken rained down on the Kusa ninja from every direction. The confusion and chaos escalated, men died and screamed. It was quick but nonetheless brutal. The Kusa ninja, which had numbered about 200, left, their numbers barely reaching 70. It was only a few moments later that Naruto was approached as he wiped his sword clean from the blood. The young woman with black hair approached him first, bowing and smiling gratefully. You saved us, you have my gratitude. Your gratitude is unnecessary, was his drawl as he sheathed his sword with a swift, firm snap. It was my mission to assist you, and I shall do so. A large hand rested itself on his shoulder, and he looked up, not surprised to find the large bearded man standing there with a smirk on his features. Come, you and all of your ninjas are invited to our celebration tonight. Naruto listened as some of his more inexperienced Umbu cheered along with the Aim and Kusanins, while others, more experienced, kept their countenance, but the slight uplifting of their shoulders told him that they too were happy about this. He nodded slowly and followed the ninja back to their camp. That evening, as promised, the Aim-Taki Alliance held a banquet to honor them and his Konoha ninja for having saved their lives. It was a setting few would ever look upon, ninja from 3 different villages, sitting down, eating and drinking together. Naruto, Yoshino and Kenpachi had a separate table a bit further away from the rest of the crowd. Kenpachi patted Naruto's shoulder amiably. We would have died without your help, my friend. Again I thank you. Naruto nodded, and soon their food arrived with their drinks. Naruto unclasped his mask, revealing his face to the 2 ninja, revealing his age. They'd suspected, his body being the first thing to have alerted them. But to see the truth of his age with their own eyes sent them into a brief silence nevertheless. Eventually it was Yoshino who began the conversation again. So, Naruto? At his nod she smiled and continued. You look so young, how old are you exactly? I will be 10 in 4 months and 3 days. He replied evenly as he parted his chopsticks with a crack. If Kenpachi or Yoshino were surprised by this, they hid it well. They both knew that Konoha had strong ninja, but to have a boy at the age of 9 already leading his own division of Umbu was practically unheard of. They exchanged a few more pleasantries, asking him about Konoha, where he in turn asked them about Aim and Taki. They didn't discuss the war, however, for now, at this moment, it was a momentary time of peace, a place to escape the bloody fate that awaited them the next day, and perhaps, Naruto unconsciously understood that. The calm yet jovial atmosphere was broken by the sound of music. The three leaders looked back to where the rest of the ninja and kunoichi were seated and found many of them beginning to stand and dance together to the music. Whether they were leaves, rain, or waterfall ninja didn't matter, it was truly a fascinating sight. Yoshino smiled and looked over to Naruto before she stood, walked around the table and grasped his hand, startling the young boy. "Dance with me." It was her simple sentence. He looked at Kenpachi, but the man only smiled and laughed jovially. Flashback in. Naruto was brought out from his musings as the rest of his commanders entered the open roof tent they were in. Ibiki looked at them but then heard a soft whisper escape the blonde lips. "They betrayed me." It was so low he probably didn't even realize he said it out loud, but Ibiki had to keep his jaw from dropping in surprise. Before he could dwell on it, the others sat down and Naruto spoke. "I see you're all here." He straightened his posture. "I believe that I have a strategy that will work." He began but was cut off by Guy. "YOSH, our youthful leader has already come up with a brilliant strategy to defeat our opponents. Tell us, Naruto-sama. What is your magnificent strategy? Share with us the brilliance that is." He was promptly cut off as Taiya's flute sailed through the air, nailing him on his right temple with enough force to send him toppling over in a daze. "For the love of God, just shut up, you monster-eyebrowed fuck!" she screeched as Guy continued to have swirly eyes, laying on the ground with a rather large bump on his head. Naruto blinked. "If you are quite finished," he said, gesturing for her to sit back down. She did so, with Guy appearing in his seat seemingly unharmed and much more calm than usual. "Now my plan is simple. You 5. He gestured to the 5 sound ninja. "Along with myself and the relief force that will arrive from Kuri tomorrow will lead the main unit to meet this coalition." "What about us?" Anko said, grinning. "What kind of blood-spilling job you got lined up for me, huh?" "You 3 in your respective squads." He gestured to Ibiki, Guy, and Anko. "We'll be having much more." He paused for a moment. "Deceiving role." Zhuge Liang stood, grabbing a large, white feathered fan from its place on the wall. It had a gold handle, and the feathers were nearly 2 feet long. Where or how he had gotten them no one really knew. Tsunade stepped forward. He smirked in her direction, a smirk that was not lost on her. It read, "Just watch." He walked past her, catching both Shizen and Akina off guard as he stood in front of the blonde girl. She looked up into his eyes, pale blue meeting blank pools of obsidian, never noticing the hand seals he formed behind his feathered fan until "Gojo Kane!" he yelled suddenly. The blonde girl tried to jump back, but before she even made it 2 inches off the ground, his hand slammed into her stomach, 5 small flames sinking into her flesh, destroying the 5-element seal placed on her by Jiraiya. She gasped in shock, and with a brief flare of chakra she collapsed, clutching her stomach and breathing heavily. What? Sleep. She heard his calm voice, before she felt her eyelids go heavy, and she fell forward. He caught her before she fell. "What did you?" Shizen too began, but was interrupted by the Reikage as he addressed his wife. "Ewing, if you would please take the young lady to one of the spare rooms to rest." He drew. She growled and stalked over, hefting the girl onto her shoulder, kicking him in the shin with enough force to make him grunt, sending a message which clearly read, "If you don't give me an explanation as soon as this is over, you are sleeping on the couch for the next month," before stalking out the door. He cleared his throat, hiding his slight discomfort. An angry wife was not something he wanted to deal with. Ever. Tsunade's eyes narrowed. "Shizen, go with her." The black-haired assistant jumped slightly, but quickly nodded as she turned and followed at a brisk pace. Liang turned back and settled his eyes on Tsunade. The two had met some time ago. While he was still a genin, she had just achieved her rank, along with her 2 other teammates, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. His team had been caught in a border skirmish along the pass which connected Konoha and Iwa, and she and her team had arrived in time to help them. Years later, when he had achieved the title of Raikage, they had met again. This time, when his scouts had found Jiraiya's half-dead body floating in the river. When asked what happened, he only said one thing: Orochimaru. It didn't take long for him to decipher what had happened. Orochimaru had betrayed the village, since he highly doubted that anything short of 20 Umbu platoons could take down 2 of the legendary Sannin while fighting alongside one another. He had sent word to Konoha, telling them that Jiraiya was in Kumo and Tsunade was the first to arrive. It is rumored that she ran 2 days straight without pause, and arrived in Kumo at the dawn of the 3rd day, healing his injuries and stabilizing his condition, before collapsing from chakra exhaustion. He had visited them during their brief stay here, hoping to finally seal a peace agreement with the Leaf Village, and had finally achieved 1 year later, with them acting as envoys. Only to have the alliance fall and break apart because many of his former high-ranking retainers wished for the Hyuga eyes. It was at that moment that he swore to never allow himself to be caught off guard by anyone again. And he had succeeded, pouring himself into the studies of strategy, psychology, diplomacy, politics, and even astrology, and was now regarded as one of the most intelligent and powerful ninja Kumo had ever produced. Some, more avid supporters of his, claimed that he could even predict the future through the use of magic. Utter nonsense, of course. He did predict the future, though hardly by magic, but instead by education. He analyzed the situation and prepared for every single viable outcome as much as he could. Then, judging by the personalities and behavioral patterns of the individuals involved, made his predictions. When an answer eluded him, that was when he turned to the stars. Though that was very rare and its effectiveness or lack thereof to date had not yet been proven, it was still something to think over. Juga. Tsunade greeted me seriously. He bowed his head, the small smirk tugging at his lips again. Tsunade. He greeted back before gesturing to one of the seats in front of his desk. Please have a seat. We have much to discuss. She nodded, and sat down. As he walked over and also sat down, setting his feathered fan down on the desk, he calmly began drinking his tea. Now you may ask what you wish. She leaned back on her chair, already having known his elusive mind games as he practiced with both her and Jiraiya when they were messengers between Kumo and Konoha. First off, how did you know about Akina's condition? He reached into one of the desk drawers and pulled out a small file. Placing it on the desk and sliding it over to her, where she carefully took it and began to examine it. You should know that your sensei could never hide something from me forever, Tsunade. He started before sipping his tea again. Though I do admit, even I had almost missed this. In fact, if it wasn't for that civil war young Naruto caused, I may have never even found out. He heard her sharp intake of breath. But this says that she's his sister. He interrupted, finishing his tea as he set the cup down. Even I was somewhat surprised by that. But it was not all that unbelievable. I have to tell, she began, but was again cut off by the Raikage. You will do nothing. His voice was soft, but held a firmness to it which made Tsunade pause. He leaned forward, staring her straight in the eye. We have not told her, not yet. She will find out soon enough on her own. Still, this news, if she finds out on her own, it could prove very damaging to Juga. Naruto killed the people he believed to be her parents, finding out not only that her parents were never really her parents to begin with, but also finding out that she's the sister of the man who murdered them is not a blow I would deal anyone. He nodded. You're right, however, she has had much to deal with. For now, we will simply inform her of her status as a Jinchuriki. Tsunade nodded slowly, though it was a bit hesitant before she looked at him. So tell me, what will you do about Naruto? You obviously have a plan. Juga nodded. Yes, I do. It all depends on Naruto's next course of action, however. He stood. Now, Tsunade-sama, I suggest you go rest. You have no doubt had a long journey. She nodded, stood, and bowed. Before she fully exited the room, another messenger entered, ran up to the Raikage, and whispered in his ear. Juga's eyes widened slightly, the only thing that betrayed his shock. I see. Thank you. The messenger bowed before leaving. Juga walked over to his desk and gripped his feathered fan, before walking to the balcony. It appears my next course of action has been decided for me, he stated simply as he placed a small note on the foot of a hawk, before releasing it to the sky. 2 days later, Iwagakure Tsuchikage residence. Good. All of our preparations have been made to march then. Yoshihiro Shimazu's gruff, but calm voice could be heard as he read over the list of provisions, medical equipment, and supplies IWA had gathered in preparation for their campaign against Konoha. Yes, uncle, Tohisa replied as he bowed his head. Yoshihiro let a smirk grace his features, one that was anticipating the battle to come. All right, let's get ready then. In 4 days' time, we'll march on to Konoha. His declaration was met with cheers from the ninja as each were eager to avenge their loss at the hands of Konoha's accursed Yondaime. However, their cheers were brought to an abrupt end as a Chunin scout barreled into the door. My lord! He yelled before he fell to his hands and knees at Yoshihiro's feet, breathing heavily as he struggled to catch his breath. Calm down, boy, what is it? Kukumo has attacked us, my lord. They're burning the villages headed straight for us. What's that? Tohisa's outraged question came as murmurs broke throughout the ninja. Yoshihiro, however, remained calm in the face of this, before he grinned and let out a bellowing laughter. So Zhuge Liang, you seek to make this war a bit more interesting too, eh? Hee, I can't wait, sleeping dragon, I can't wait. Naruto stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking Fire Country. In the far distance he could see the faint smoke. That's where the enemy was. Kenpachi Yoshino, he thought as his eyes narrowed. You too seek to stand against me now. He unsheathed his blade, watching as the pale moonlight reflected off the edge. And thus provide my first true obstacle in my path to conquest. However, I have come too far to fall by the likes of you. I will win, you will not stop me, none of you can stop me. Kusame Tuki Encampment. Yoshino stared at the night sky, a somber, almost pained expression on her face, as she gripped a butterfly pendant around her neck. Kenpachi stood behind her, an equally somber expression clouding his features. Naruto. Chapter 34. To see what lies beyond. The cool breeze of the crisp air ruffled the trees as the morning mist began to part. Naruto stood on one of the trees that overlooked the coalition encampment. They were 300 yards away more or less, but even from this distance he could tell that they were readying themselves to march again. He felt the branch shift beneath him, and turned his head to catch sight of Guan and Jinchiko. The Kiri ninja's missing eye was patched up nicely, only the faint edges of the scars Shizun's had caused could be seen. And Jinchiko also looked well despite her all-too-recent injuries. Naruto looked back to the camp. I assume your men have been briefed. The two Kiri nodded before allowing their own gaze to travel to the camp just a stone's throw away. Guan moved to speak, but Jinchiko beat him to it, surprising him slightly. Lord, if we do not end this quickly, I fear Iwa, Kumo or Suna may take advantage and strike us from the rear. Both Guan and Naruto noticed her slight hesitation in calling him Lord. To be expected, the Jinchuriki is supposed. He nodded. Do not worry, I have already addressed the situation between Kumo and Iwa. It will hopefully keep them busy enough for us to finish this undisturbed. Both Guan and Jinchiko exchanged glances before the larger man decided to voice their thoughts. What do you mean, sir? A platoon of 30 Kumo Umbu leapt through the trees silently. Their forms mere blurs as they whipped past. The leader, a man wearing a bear mask with a green cloak, held up his hand, signaling them all to stop. This is far enough. He yelled before he leapt down to the forest floor, the others following closely behind. The leader reached for his mask and with a soft click, the strap was unbound and he slipped it off, revealing. Ah, my youthful comrades! We have arrived in fire territory again. Remove your face masks and let our victory be heard. Such was the cry of one Mado guy as he threw off his green cloak. The rest of the ninja removed the forged Kumo Umbu masks and headbands, revealing Konoha and Chunin hidden beneath. One grunted as he removed his mask and cloak, tossing them aside as he fixed his headband. I gotta say, Hokage-sama's pretty smart, having us pit Kumo and Iwa against each other. Guy's expression didn't change as he thought. Already they acknowledge him as their Hokage. Still, even Guy had to admit the strategy was good. Have his squad pretend to be ninja, and attack Iwa, who had no doubt been planning to attack Konoha, thus putting their two greatest threats against one another, leaving him free to deal with this coalition. Guy-san. Another addressed him. Do you believe Ibiki-san's and Anko-san's missions will proceed as planned? He smiled, giving the man his nice guy pose. Do not worry, my youthful comrade, our friends Ibiki and Anko will succeed. Before the man could say anything further, Guy turned on his heel. Now, my youthful comrades, onward, back to Konoha. A short pause. That's the direction of Kumo, isn't it? One ninja whispered to another. Yes, he answered back. Another short pause. How long do you think it'll take him to figure it out? It's Guy, how long do you think? Yet another short pause. Fuck. Meanwhile, Ibiki and Anko were also leaping from tree to tree, their two contingents, numbering 60 men in total, following closely. Ibiki looked at the purple-haired Kunoichi as he spoke. This is where we part ways, good luck, Anko. She grinned back at him. Ah, Ibiki-chan, you really do care. She sniffed a few fake tears as he grunted in irritation. She giggled after a moment. Don't worry, I don't need luck, I've got knives. He nodded before he made a few hand signs to the men behind him and with a strong leap, swerved to the right, vanishing into the forest along with his men. Anko smirked as she looked behind her to her own group of ninja. All right, boys, we gotta make good time so we can catch those grass idiots off guard. Pick it up. 2 days later, Naruto stood again at the top of a tree, the green leaves shielding his form from the harsh sun and the eyes of the enemy who continued to approach. They were still just beyond his sights, just a few hundred yards. Kimimaro suddenly appeared next to him. The last Kagaya stared impassively at his leader. We are in the position of Naruto-sama. At your command. Naruto nodded. I trust you know the plan. When I give the signal, pull back immediately. Kimimaro nodded. Yes, however, you have yet to tell us what the signal is to Naruto-sama. He replied impassively. Do not worry, Kimimaro, you will all know it when you see it. He replied somewhat cryptically before he looked to the former Sound Nin. Now go, rejoin your squad and wait for the enemy. He bowed his head once before leaping to the treetops. Naruto looked back to the general area. He could feel the enemy approaching from Kenpachi, Yoshino, and Zaraki. The three of you have decided to shoulder a burden far too heavy for you to bear. I shall take that burden from you, together with your lives. Yoshino sighed to herself as she sped through the forest floor, the rest of the ninja army moving swiftly at her side. The coming confrontation was not something she wanted, and the more she ran it around in her head, the less she wanted it. Still, just as Lord Kenpachi said, they had to fight. As the leader of her village, she had no choice but to fight and defend her lands now, no matter how much it pained her to do so. Yoshino smiled as she gently traced the petals of a flower. She had found this field near their encampment shortly after they had placed it, and for the last month or so came here every night. It was beautiful and calming, reminding her much of Ames' delicate flower gardens. The tropical nature of the country made it so that a variety of wildlife and plant life could thrive easily even within the city limits. She sighed, but the sound of footsteps caught her attention. She turned, gripping one of her chain whips instinctively before she caught sight of the familiar mask. She smiled, though she knew it would not be returned. Naruto-san, what are you doing here? You have been leaving the encampment often of late. I found it prudent to follow. She hid a frown at that. She knew the reason why he had followed. He wanted to make sure that she wasn't leaking information to the enemy. While she was insulted by the insinuation, she also knew that not taking such precautions was foolish. She would let it slide. She made herself smile a bit more before she sat down and motioned for him to join her. He walked over, but didn't sit, merely standing by her side. I like this place. She spoke, whether it was to herself or to him he didn't know, but he still felt compelled to ask. Why? She smiled and gestured to the field that lay before them. It's beautiful here. The troubles of the world don't reach this place. She took a deep breath as she paused. And even if it's for a moment, I can be at peace. HN, was his monosyllabic response as he knelt down, cradling one of the delicate flowers with his calloused hands. You find beauty in these? His tone was neutral as he spoke. Their beauty is fleeting. Soon they will wither away into nothingness. She smiled kindly, pitying the poor boy that had been turned into this, but she wouldn't show it. She wouldn't dishonor him like that. Similar to our own lives, don't you think? He turned towards her then, the slitted eye holes of his face mask not allowing her to see the calm pits of ice as they stared into her own dark brown ones. She smiled again before looking up at the sky. Our lives, just like these flowers, are fleeting. Naruto-san, we're here today, but what if tomorrow will we still be here? No one knows. That's why we must cherish each special moment that brings us peace. He said nothing, instead turning his gaze to the sky. She smiled as she looked upon his form of crimson and black, smiling in something akin to fondness. Naruto-san, she thought. I know that somewhere you have a kind heart. They haven't succeeded in taking that from you, and hopefully they never will. They remained there, at peace. Flashback in. Beside her small form, Kenpachi watched as her form visibly sagged, as if a great weight was on her shoulders. He knew why. He, too, was not in any way looking forward to the conflict to come. He remembered that boy, and despite that they had met mainly on the field of battle or near one, his memories were nothing but amiable with the young man. Flashback. That wound you received yesterday has not yet healed. You should return to the camp. I will keep the enemy occupied here. Naruto spoke calmly to the larger man that stood beside him. Kenpachi smiled, but it came out more like a grimace as he rubbed his bandaged chest. I cannot allow you to do that, Naruto-san. You see, we must hold out until our reinforcements arrive, and though you are strong, my men do not know you. Seeing me here will raise morale and help them all fight better. If you do not rest, then it will not matter because you will die regardless. Then where will their morale be? Kenpachi sighed. The boy didn't understand. He placed his arm on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto-san, look at those men behind us. He spoke calmly, almost in a fatherly tone. Naruto did as asked and looked behind him to the 40 or so ninja that went about preparing themselves for the coming battle. Now please tell me, what do you see? Men preparing their equipment, he answered simply. I will tell you what I see. I see comrades with families waiting for them back home. People worth protecting. If it helps them return to their families, to their lives, I will gladly sacrifice my own. Remember that every comrade is precious and must be protected. He paused for a moment before he spoke again. When one is fighting to protect, not destroy, that is when one's true strength is revealed. Remember that, Naruto-san. And now they marched against him. It was distasteful, to say the least. The leader of Taki was brought out of his thoughts as a loud crash and dust cloud appeared in front of them. There was a loud cry of ambush. 3 large snakes appeared from the cloud of dust and slammed into their forward ranks, and hundreds of kunai and shuriken rained down on them as Konoha ninja began leaping down from the thick tree canopy. Naruto knelt on the head of one of the summoned snakes, his feet sticking firmly to the creature's head with chakra. One of his swords was unsheathed, glinting in what little light cut through the trees above. The snake beneath him thrashed violently, lashing out with deadly poison and razor-sharp fangs, scales like black chain mail as they deflected kunai and shuriken all too easily. He leaned to the left, then to the right, avoiding 2 ninjas that lunged at him, and then catching the throat of the third one with a swipe of his sword. Blood rained around him, falling and losing itself in the crimson cloak over his shoulders. His sensitive ears caught the whizzing sound of kunai slicing through the air. With a small gust of wind chakra he deflected them, the exploding tags going off in the air before they reached him, picking up dust and whipping the wind and heat across his face. With a leap he got off the snake's head, going through the flames and dust, charging headfirst into the enemy ranks, which had been reduced to a chaotic mass of people as Konoha ninja and kunai rained down over their heads. He wasted no time as he began cutting his enemies to pieces with swift and precise movements, aiming for vital arteries and organs as he sliced them open. He sidestepped one's attempt at a downward cut before he swiftly and effortlessly cut open his stomach before grabbing his face and shoving him to the floor. He blocked another strike aimed at his thigh and countered with an upward sweep of his blade, cutting off the man's leg at the hip. He took out a kunai and threw it, lodging the metallic projectile between the eyes of another who charged at him. He heard the sound of chains and turned on his heel, raising his forearm in time to block a kunai with a chain attachment. It wrapped around his arm and the man pulled hard. Naruto gripped the chain and sent a burst of wind chakra up the length of the chain, shredding it and the man's arm to pieces. He turned, blocking a kunai easily as he unsheathed his second blade. He could see the former sound ninja as they made their presence known. Arrows from Kadamura killed ninja before they could scream. Jiroba's massive strength and arsenal of earth working together with Sakan and his brother Yukon. He could hear Taiya's flute in the distance, the tune distinctive and distracting among the other sounds on this field. He looked to the right, and found another ninja approaching, but before he was able to dispatch him himself, a sword made from bone impaled the man, stopping him dead in his tracks. Naruto looked up to Kimimaro as the bone user passed overhead and nodded in his direction. Kimimaro nodded back, before calling his sword back and using his bone whip to lash out at others around him. He took a stance with his two blades held in a reverse grip, lashing out with a confusing flurry of moves, weaving and moving in and out of attacks as if he had rehearsed it, killing ninja with each swing of his two blades. In the distance he noticed Jinchiko and Guan as the two cut a bloody swath across the field with Guan's massive strength and Jinchiko's swifter lightning strikes. He cut open another ninja's throat, unmindful of the blood that sprayed over him as he observed his retainers. His senses perked up as he felt a familiar presence, two familiar presences actually. He stopped, freezing mid-motion before he straightened and turned slowly, his blue irises glowing faintly beneath his hood as he finally rested them on the two he once called allies, just as Yoshino's chain whips cut down a Konoha nin and Kenpachi dispatched another. The two stilled, sensing his gaze on them, they turned, finally coming face to face with the boy they hadn't seen in years. Even with the changes to his attire and physical body, they knew it was him. His presence was unmistakable. Their gazes held one another for a long time as the battlefield seemed to vanish from view. Both Yoshino and Kenpachi's eyes held a silent plea. Don't do this. However, something shocking and disturbing occurred just then. His shoulders shook, and with a start they realized he was laughing, the hollow sound of his voice sending chills down their spines that froze the marrow in their bones. They are ready to fight this boy that they had once called a comrade when suddenly, before anyone could react, another ninja appeared behind the blonde. They recognized him instantly, Zaraki, the leader of Kusa. Naruto turned his head to look back at his attacker, and Yoshino could have sworn she saw his eyes flash before Zaraki brought his blade down, small traces of lightning chakra surrounding the weapon, allowing it to burn and tear through flesh and bone as he carved a deep jagged wound down his back, from his right shoulder, all the way down to the left hip. Their eyes widened in momentary shock and horror as blood exploded like a shower from the garish wound, and Yoshino could not stifle her gasp. The blade in Naruto's right hand dully clattered to the floor as he fell on his side, crimson blood pooling around him. Zaraki moved quickly, his blade ready to deliver the killing blow. However, a whip made from bone snatched the weapon from his hand. He turned, just in time to barely avoid Kimimaro as the bone user lunged at him. Yoshino and Kenpachi, after a moment of hesitation, moved to join the fight when Jinchiko appeared in front of them right on, Denko no Heki. A small wall of lightning exploded from the ground between them, stopping the two in their tracks as she leapt back. She looked to Naruto in time to see Guan place his arm over his shoulder, ignoring the blood as it seeped into his green clothes, turning them a dark brown color. Seeing her commander in such a state, she cupped her hands over her mouth and called the order. Retreat! Retreat! She yelled, throwing a green smoke bomb down on the ground, alerting the Konoha nuns that it was they who had been called to retreat. After a few moments of confusion, the Konoha ninja again took to the trees, retreating swiftly back to their own territory. Quickly! Reform the ranks, we must pursue him at once. Zaraki called to his men before turning to Yoshino and Kenpachi. You two as well, move quickly, now is our chance to end this upstart. We have to get after him right now. The dragon-masked ninja spoke. Zaraki-sama. Yoshino spoke calmly. This could all be a trap, we must proceed with caution, do not pursue the enemy so hastily. I'm not sure how many wars you've fought, Lady Yoshino, but I assure you that now that their leader has been injured and they stand without him and are demoralized, this is the greatest opportunity to rout them completely. Her eyes narrowed. I have fought plenty of wars, Lord Zaraki, and I also learned that rushing into a fight will more than likely lead to your own defeat rather than theirs. Fine then. The Kusanin growled out. You two can stay here and plan, resting your frail bones while the rest of us secure our homes. With that he turned to assist in organizing his men to retake the pursuit as quickly as possible. Yoshino grit her teeth hard before she felt Kenpachi's calming hand on her shoulder. Kenpachi. I know, Lady Yoshino, he replied quietly before he too began moving to organize his men. Meanwhile the Konoha ninja rushed through the trees at breakneck speed, the sound 5, Jinchiko, Guan and the injured Naruto at the head. Guan heard a faint chuckle at his side, and with a slight start, the long-bearded man realized it was Naruto himself that was chuckling. Why are you laughing at Naruto-sama? He questioned, worried that the boy was delirious from blood loss already. Because Guan, they injured me, they believe they can win. It took a moment for the green-clad Kiri ninja to catch up with what he really meant. You knew the attack was coming? Of course I did, was his simple reply. Then why did you not dodge it? Simple, now that they believe they can win, they will pursue us, leaving their rear open. Guan was left speechless as he dumbly leapt through the trees. Then that means that those 3 squads you sent out earlier, he trailed off as Naruto nodded. Yes, one was to distract Kumo and Iwa, and the other 2 will attack the villages of Aim and Kusa now that they're away. In their haste, they will not learn of it until it's far too late. They've done what? That was the voice of the resident Jinchuriki of Kumogakure, otherwise known as Yujito, as she addressed the Reikage, who calmly sipped more of his tea before he answered. Konoha has fooled Iwa into believing we attacked them. Yoshihiro is marching his men to our borders. What? We have to tell them what happened right now. She spoke as she moved to the door when his voice reached her. No, we will not. Excuse me? Was her incredulous question as she rounded back to him. I said, we will not tell them anything, merely send orders to tighten the defenses around our borders. But sir. Yujito. He interrupted firmly yet gently. Come with me, he said as he stood from his desk and made his way to the balcony. The blonde girl followed silently. He stood leaning one hand over the railing and waited for her to join him. When she finally did, he spoke. What you must learn, Yujito, is to see beyond the battlefield, to see the repercussions of your actions, rather than your actions themselves. Is that what you do? Seeing what lies beyond? He nodded slowly, his raven black tresses waving slightly in the cool breeze. Yes, see what lies beyond, Yujito. When you learn to do that, tell me what you see. Chapter 36, Bittersweet Memories. To the world, it seemed as if the unlikely alliance of Kusa, Aim and Taki had achieved a miraculous victory over the Konoha along the outskirts of Fire Territory. However, as the main force moved deeper into Konoha's borders, ready to take the legendary Leaf Village once and for all, news reached them that 2 contingents of Leaf Ninja had taken the villages of Aim and Kusa, cutting them off from Taki. The pursuit ended immediately, and the entire army immediately rounded back at full speed, intending to reach and retake their cities before their Konoha pursuers caught up to them. However, their efforts proved to be for naught, as they were intercepted by another contingent of Leaf Ninja, this one led by Mado Gai, joined by divisions of Enko and Ibiki's troops. The coalition, though holding a much greater numerical advantage, was completely exhausted both physically and mentally from nearly a full 2 days' forced march, and so were no match for the well-rested Leaf Ninja. When the main Leaf force, that had turned around the moment word reached them of Enko and Ibiki's victories, were seen by the coalition's rearguard troops, the allied ninja had no choice and broke ranks. With nowhere to return to, cut off from supplies and quickly losing morale, the alliance that had seemed to be on the cusp of victory less than a week ago was now on the verge of a total rout. With nowhere left for them to retreat, the coalition forces fled to the abandoned fortress of Nanao on the border of Suna and Konoha. The fortress stood little more as a ruin, built during the very first founding of Konoha. Its military value had deteriorated long ago. Though its walls were imposing, little else of value rested within the fortress. Left by the military forces of Konoha for merely 50 years, it had become a sanctuary and refuge for many refugees, bandits, rounding and missing ninja over the decades. Soon after their arrival, they fortified their position by barricading the walls of the fortress city once more. Some of the refugees fled, while others remained in their homes, either having the will or the strength to leave. Naruto, leading the corps of the army, rendezvoused with Mado Gai, leading a second contingent, and 2 more small units arriving from the southeast, led by Hatake Kakashi and Mika, Guan's apprentice whom had requested the assignment. The Leaf army swiftly proceeded to surround the city shortly after arriving, cutting them off from any supplies they may have hoped to attain as Naruto began his siege. Damn it! The dragon-masked leader of Kusa snarled as he stormed into the main hall of the old, ruined fortress, Yoshino and Kenpachi following shortly behind him as he began pacing agitatedly up and down the length of the hallway. Lord Zaraki. What? The Kusa-nin growled as he rounded on Kenpachi's larger form. The Taki leader sighed in exasperation. I suggest you calm yourself. This is a situation that must be approached calmly. The shorter man took a deep breath and visibly calmed before he nodded. Yes, you are right. He looked to his two allies, taking in the serious and tense expressions. From what I've heard, you two have dealt with this Uzumaki boy before. What would you suggest as a plan to get out of this situation? Kenpachi and Yoshino shared a glance before they motioned to the chairs and sat down in a semicircle. In all honesty, Lord Zaraki, Yoshino began, we only have one choice that can guarantee, at least the lives of our men, and that is to simply surrender to Naruto-san. Surrender? He questioned. The two of you are some of the greatest ninja Taki or AIM has ever produced. You two single-handedly led Takusa's defeat in their campaign to take the central marshlands. I know because I was there. He sounded just a little bitter at the last part. They noticed but let it slide. You are legends in your own right, and you mean to say you cannot think of one single strategy that can help? Yoshino and Kenpachi sighed. Many of the legends of their strength were just that legends. Naruto had helped in most of their exploits in one way or another, however, so as not to cause an incident. Both his and his Konoha comrades' intervention had been kept a secret. Of course they were both strong, but any victory against the Uzumaki child one-on-one was a long shot, especially if he used his bijou. Kenpachi spoke again. I am afraid, Lord Zaraki, victory at this point is nigh impossible. Nothing is impossible. Every adversary has a weakness. Not this adversary. Kenpachi spoke again more forcefully. He leaned forward, staring straight into the dragon mask eye holes with unwavering force. You do not know this boy. When he was only 9, he was already at the level of an elite. I have little doubt that he is at, or beyond our level now. This is not just some green fool that has read up on a few strategy books. This is someone who was bred for this, someone who was made for this. This is not an adversary that we could defeat. You are wrong. That wound I gave him was received on purpose and has most likely already healed. Yoshino interrupted this time. The room fell into silence after that, and the three looked to each other. Finally Zaraki spoke. Then I suppose we have no choice. We surrender to the Uzumaki boy tomorrow. Wait. Yoshino spoke again. We must make it very clear to him that the peasants here had nothing to do with this. I do not want them suffering his wrath. The two other men nodded in agreement. Konoha encampment, outskirts of Nanao. Naruto again stood at the edges of the camp, observing the crumbling walls of the old outpost/city as he watched the enemy ninja frantically work through the night to bolster the defenses to a respectable degree. Foolish, really. The strongest defenses were little better than an inconvenience if manned by an exhausted army, whereas a single hill could be held by a well-rested and alert one. He didn't really know why he did this. He could easily send a scout to watch and report the enemy's movements. But for some reason he preferred to do the mundane task himself. Perhaps because he found it more effective that way, or perhaps simply because it helped him mentally prepare for the coming confrontation. Perhaps it was just simply one of his quirks. Was that what Kakashi had called it? He mentally shrugged. Whatever the reason, he found this to be one of his few indulgences. However, over the last day or so he felt a strange ache, like a gnawing feeling in his chest. He didn't know why. Really, his troops were in position and ready to lay waste to the coalition at a moment's notice. His scouts hadn't reported any change in Iwa's march to Kumo's borders in the north, and Suna was still in a civil and military turmoil. No help was coming for them, and there was no reason for this feeling, no reason for concern. Perhaps because of the enemy themselves. Desperation breeds determination after all. The tides could always turn at a moment's notice. He could not let down his guard, especially against these opponents. He was startled out of his thoughts when he felt a small drop fall onto his cheek. He looked up to the dark sky as they rumbled with thunder, like battle drums overlooking the battle to come. It had rained that day too. Naruto again found himself walking to the flower field. It had become something of a ritual, really. Every day, whenever they were both in the camp, they would meet in this field. They did not always speak, sometimes they did not have to. The sky rumbled, as if it was growling as it released the waters held within it, the heavy shower falling like sheets. The battle today had been more brutal than usual. The Kusanins had holed themselves up in a local village and had taken refuge in the homes of civilians. In the ensuing chaos, many combatants and non-combatants lost their lives, something that was weighing heavily on the men's morale. He found her where he always did, Her eyes were closed, staring up to the sky as she basked in the cool drops that fell over her skin, running down her face, and for a moment Naruto could have sworn those were tears. He stepped forward, ignoring the flowers he crushed under his feet as he made his way closer. Finally, when he stopped at her side, she spoke. "This weather, it's nice." Her voice was melancholy and Naruto could hear the strain there, and he realized that he had not just been imagining her tears. "Why do you cry, Yoshino?" he questioned. "What was done today was necessary. There is no reason to cry over it." She smiled, still not taking her gaze from the black clouds even as lightning streaked through the sky, illuminating everything for a brief moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy and Naruto realized again how very different others were from him. Unlike himself, she carried the deaths with her. Every flame she snuffed out was yet another weight on her heart. She carried them, he discarded them, like petals to the winds in a storm, never to be found again. When one is a figurehead for the soldiers, you can never show weakness. If you show weakness, they will weaken because of it. You can never let your emotions get the better of you because then that will make them worry. You must be their pillar of strength, you must be the one to keep their resolve strong. She took a deep breath as her smile widened slightly. "But here, in this rain, I'm free." "I do not understand." "What do you?" he began, but stopped as she walked forward and embraced him, her hands clinging to his cloak. It was almost desperate in nature as she held him tight. "Yoshino-san?" he questioned in a confused tone as she held him tighter. "Just hold me, Naruto, just for a little while, just until the rain stops." He was confused by her need for physical contact from him, but decided to comply and slowly wrapped his arms around her as the rain fell over them. Naruto watched the rumbling clouds as the memory of that day washed over him. He looked back to Nanao once more before swiftly turning on his heel to walk back to camp. Yoshino sighed silently as she sat in her tent, swirling some sake in the saucer she held in her hand. Despite what she stated she knew, and she was sure Kenpachi knew as well, there was a very real possibility Naruto would not accept their surrender. They had become close, at least slightly, and betrayal was not something anyone handled well. "I can only hope," she pleaded as she fingered a small necklace, in the design of a butterfly between her fingers. Smiling softly at the memory of just how she had gotten this pendant, and Kenpachi had gotten the marble Buddhist beads he held everywhere. Naruto, Kenpachi, and Yoshino stood on the borderline of Konoha, a small contingent of AIM and Taki ninja behind their two leaders, and Naruto's remaining Umbu behind him. "I suppose this is goodbye then?" Yoshino spoke with a somewhat sad smile on her lips. Naruto simply nodded, not revealing anything beneath the mask that covered his features. "Yes, it is." He spoke emotionlessly as he always did. "Farewell." The situation felt strangely uncomfortable to him, and so he quickly decided to end it, bowing once before turning and beginning to march to his men. "Naruto-san." He heard Kenpachi call and turned to face the larger man as he held out a red oak box, about 4 feet long and 2 feet wide, offering it to him. Naruto took the box carefully before sliding it open as Kenpachi spoke. "I noticed many times in our battles that you favor wielding 2 weapons. I believe these will serve you well. They were made with Taki's finest, chakra-channeling steel." Naruto finished opening the box, and unrolling the purple silk within, was greeted by the sight of 2 scimitars. The same ones he'd wielded ever since. Kenpachi smiled, easily seeing the surprise, if only slight, through the minute changes in his posture. Yoshino smiled and walked forward, holding a small item wrapped in red cloth. He closed the box, placing it gently down to the floor before taking the offered item. He unrolled the cloth, revealing another nearly identical to his own. He turned it over to look on the inside, finding numerous small seals over the forehead and cheek areas. "They'll help conceal your chakra so that you can focus more on the job rather than actively concealing it," she said with a small smile, shifting a little from foot to foot. "Will you try it on?" "I wasn't really sure about the size." Naruto paused for a moment before slowly unclasping his original mask with a clicking sound. When he finally removed it, both Kenpachi and Yoshino had to hide their frowns as they were again greeted by his young features. Naruto placed his new mask on and looked at the two. "My apologies, I did not realize it was a tradition to exchange gifts during a departure, and as such I have not acquired anything for you." The two again hid their sadness at his lack of understanding as they smiled and spoke. Naruto-san, it is no tradition. We are comrades, and you have assisted us greatly, and as such we want to repay you for everything you have done. I see. He spoke slowly, though his tone betrayed some of his confusion. Yoshino walked over and hugged him. She felt as he stiffened and pulled back, smiling up into the black featureless mask that stared blankly back at her. Take care of yourself, Naruto. He nodded before he turned and vanished in a swirl of leaves along with his men. 3 months later. Yoshino sighed tiredly as she entered her room. The last 2 months had been nothing but boring negotiations between Kusa-Aim and Taki. Peace agreements they were called, but it was the most boring thing on this earth, and today had been no different. Stuffed bureaucrats with enough of a pretty penny to hire herself and Kenpachi as guards arguing over foolish matters. She just wanted to crawl into her bed, read her book and pray that tomorrow was the last day. However, just as she moved to do just that, something gave her pause, something that was not there before. A small wooden box was placed over her pillow. Now she knew that the staff at this establishment didn't leave such things. And so she approached carefully, picking up the box after making sure there were no traps and then making sure there were no booby traps that she could detect inside of it. She carefully opened the box and gasped at the sight that greeted her. A necklace in the design of a butterfly, with a silver chain. The butterfly was small but made with beautiful sapphires that gave it an almost purple tint when the sun hit it. When she looked into the box, she found a note. She picked it up and read it. This necklace has a small seal that can store up to the chakra capacity of an average. It may help sometime in the future. It took her only a moment to realize just who gave her this, and she smiled fondly at the realization. A knock at her door brought her out of her thoughts. Opening the door, she found Kenpachi fingering some red beads. I assume you received one as well, judging by the look on your face. Mine helps guard against genjutsu. Neither noticed the figure that leapt away from the rooftops. The shadow's time in the light is only fleeting, before returning to its darkness. Yoshino sighed. If only things were different. She wished so much for it to be different, and she was certain Kenpachi must feel the same way. But they had both sworn to defend their village from everything that was threatened, even if it was an old friend. She sighed, fingering the necklace again before tucking it into her shirt. Naruto. The next morning, Naruto was overlooking preparations that his ninja went through for the eventual assault on Nanao, everything from some basic chakra control exercises to light sparring and even sharpening their weapons. However, one sight brought a strange sense of, perhaps nostalgia was the proper word. Everywhere he looked he could see ninja of different nations. While the unity of Konoha had been broken, it was being replaced by another unity. A unity forged through the desire to survive. He held no delusions that his people loved him. In fact, many probably loathed him. He didn't care as long as they did not spread their hate. But he knew that through fear of him was because why many followed him, now that he had conquered Kiri, was keeping the 3 major nations at bay and now had this coalition against the ropes, so to speak. Some held a faint glimmer of hope or belief that his mission was possible, but many still believed he was nothing but a fool, and so they were now helping each other out of interest for their own survival. It was born out of desperation, as many things in the shinobi nation were, but he knew that if he won this battle, it would evolve into camaraderie, and finally loyalty to each other. Perhaps eventually to him. He was brought out of his musings as a Chunin messenger frantically ran towards him. He didn't even reach him completely before he yelled out, "Naruto-sama, Nanao's gates are opening." That caught Naruto slightly off guard, but he quickly schooled his features and spoke. "Send word to the other commanders. I want them to ready their men for anything and to meet me at point 5 immediately." Understood, Naruto-sama. The Chunin bowed before he ran again in the opposite direction. A few minutes later, Naruto stood facing the drawn lines of the coalition, the Leaf and Kiri ninja at his back, Kakashi, Guan, Jinchiko and Kimimara flanking him. Slowly, from the center of the formed-up enemy ninja, 3 began making their way towards him. One he recognized as the one who injured him, the other 2 he recognized from old memories. Immediately, Zuroku Kenpachi and Mizumi Yoshino, the leaders of Taki and Aim, and 2 people he would have once called comrades. His eyes narrowed as he began walking forward, the 4 commanders following behind him after a brief moment's hesitation. As he approached, he watched the features of his 2 former allies carefully. While they could hide it to the world, they could never hide it to him. No, not him. He could see their anxiety, their nervousness, and their fear clearly as if they were fresh out of the academy. The distance was closing between them, enough for him to see into their eyes. They stared back, but they could never pierce the veil of shadows that shielded him. Finally, the leaders of the two armies stood face to face, their soldiers standing tense behind them, ready to spring into action on a mere moment's notice. He heard Kakashi as the man slipped a kunai into his hand. The subtle shift in Kimimura's stance indicated he was ready to strike out with his bones at a moment's notice. He let his eyes travel to Kenpachi to his left. The man met his gaze steadily, with that same powerful countenance he always displayed with every obstacle. He let his eyes travel to the next person, standing directly in front of him as he looked into the slitted eye holes of the green dragon mask of the Kusa leader before finally setting his eyes on the last leader of this coalition. It may have simply been coincidence or something more, but at that moment the wind blew heavily, shifting his hood enough for a brief flicker of light to reach his eyes. Cold pools of ice stared into hazel brown before he turned them back to the Kusa leader as he addressed him. Naruto-sama. The title was strained as it escaped his lips. Obviously, this man felt he was beneath his respect despite the situation he currently found himself in. We are here to discuss terms of peace. In other words, you are here to discuss your surrender, he stated blandly. He could practically hear the man's teeth chipping from the force with which they clenched together. When he spoke again, one could easily hear his anger. We are willing to accept an immediate cease of hostilities, and we will pull back our men from. Your plea for surrender is denied. Naruto spoke, his voice firm and unwavering as he turned his eyes onto the three coalition commanders. Your three villages sought to destroy us when you thought we were at our weakest. I will use you and your men as examples for any other fools that dare to cross me. He turned and began leaving as he spoke. I suggest you make your peace tomorrow is your last day on this earth. Even his own men seemed surprised at his decision. Kakashi and Jinchiko's discomfort could be seen easily. Guan and Kimimura's was hidden, but he could still detect it. He paused as a familiar voice reached him. Wait. He turned and saw Yoshino as she approached him. Kimimura, ever the present sentinel, along with Guan placed themselves in her way. Naruto held up his hand, waving them off. They stepped back, allowing her to pass. She walked up to him, staring straight into his glowing eyes before she bowed and spoke. Naruto-sama, please don't let your anger towards myself and Kenpachi cloud your judgment. Don't make all of these ninja pay for our actions. The entire group of people present looked decidedly shocked and even took a few steps back as if they'd been smacked. Naruto stared at her for a long while before she bowed her head a little lower. Please, if it will appease you, then simply kill me, but spare my men, I beg you. The ringing sound of a sword being drawn echoed in her ears before she found the tip of a sword held at her neck, forcing her to look up into his eyes as he spoke. You would die for them then? She nodded without a moment's hesitation. His grip on the blade shifted. Before the glow and cracking of lightning reached their ears, the Kusa leader appeared behind the blade, cracking with lightning as he brought it down. No, stop! But it was too late. Naruto sidestepped the attack and grabbed the man by the throat. After that, chaos erupted around them as the two armies clashed. Chapter 37 – Burden of Grief. If one had ever seen a spark go off in a room full of gas fumes and gunpowder, they would describe the effect to be similar to the effect Zaraki's attack on Naruto had on these two forces. With a snarl of anger, Naruto snapped the Kusa leader's neck in two with a sickening crack. A second later, the man melted into a pool of mud at the Jinchuriki's feet. Naruto snarled as he turned his glowing blue eyes onto Yoshino's shocked features. The golden bracers on his wrists hissed and pulsed as the seals glowed red. He unsheathed his second blade as he raised the first one, ready to deliver the killing blow this time. Yoshino snapped out of her stupor in time to grab the two chain whips resting on her shoulders, pushing chakra into them. The small jointed areas locked together, forming a solid rod-like weapon with tiny blades sticking out of the edges all around. The unconventional weapon became hard enough to stop his blade as she crisscrossed them in an X pattern above her. Half of the whip was now solid, the other slack as they hung limply from her shoulders. Naruto snarled as he reared back his second blade, but as he swung, it was intercepted by Kenpachi's Naginata. He turned his ice blues onto the large man, who met his gaze evenly. With a heave, Naruto was shoved back as Kenpachi helped Yoshino back to her feet. The young woman looked back into Naruto's eyes, but when she did, she found nothing, no hesitation, no sadness, no regret. There was only anger. Anger and hate. The blonde's eyes glared fiercely at the two before he took his fighting stance, his voice laced with venom as he spoke. So be it. Kakashi's first instinct was to rush to Naruto's aid. However, before he could move forward in order to do that, numerous Anbu appeared, blocking his path. His eyes scanned over them quickly before he dashed, full speed as he formed his hand seals. The Chidori flared to life in his hand as he rushed one of the Anbu. The Anbu raised his sword in a futile effort to hold off the attack as Kakashi was moving too fast to dodge perfectly. However, to his surprise, instead of plunging the lightning blade into his chest, Kakashi leapt up, landing on the man's shoulders and using him as a springboard to lunge even further into the enemy ranks, heading directly for one of the two Anbu captains. As Kakashi's form arched through the air, the cackling of the Chidori trailing behind him, he looked to be little more than a streak of black and lightning before he plunged the attack in the captain's chest, the roar of the thousand birds dying down. It marked the start of this battle. Kimimara's bones shifted under his skin, forming an armor beneath the thin layer of his flesh as he launched numerous bone bullets from his fingers towards the ninja that had just appeared before them, catching a few of them off guard. The bullets punched through their chests and shoulders before they retaliated by launching several kunai and shuriken. The blades were shrugged off of his skin, barely even managing to scratch open centimeters of skin before they struck hard, unyielding bone. His attention was brought to the area in front of him as one of the Anbu appeared, sword already reared back for a swing. The bone user's eyes narrowed before he threw a heavy bone from his wrist which slammed into the surprised Anbu's mask, sending him reeling before Kimimaro appeared semi-crouched in front of him. Gripping the man's sword arm with his free hand, he pressed the fingertips of his other hand against the man's stomach before he let loose another quick burst of bone bullets, filling the man's stomach cavity full of the tiny projectiles. As he moved to pull away, however, the man's last clenching grip on his wrist tightened, stopping him from moving. Kimimaro's attention was brought to his right as an orange glow reached him, revealing a carrier Enden technique heading straight for him, the fire dragon's roar ringing loud in his ears as the fire kissed his pale skin with its terrible touch. The heat was intense. He wasn't sure if he would survive it. Fire was the only true weakness of his bloodline. While his bone armor worked on almost any other attack, the heat, as well as the fact that his armor had practically no air holes, made it very difficult for heat to escape should he come too close to it, thus making it so any katon that was too close would literally boil his organs from the inside out. Receiving a direct hit as he was about to do now, well, he began to sprout bones to form a cocoon around him, but he knew he'd never get it up in time. The attack was coming too fast. Just as the blast was a mere 20 feet away, there was a flutter of green robes as Guan appeared in front of the bone ninja and slammed his hands on the ground, erecting a thick wall of earth in time to save them both. He looked to the Kagaya. He had experience with that clan, and had seen many of their abilities. Boy, tell me, can you shape your bones into a cocoon around yourself? Yes, why do you ask? Just do it. The older man snapped, though Kimimaro never liked taking orders from anyone other than Orochimaru, and now Naruto he complied and enlarged the bones in his body to wrap around him in a protective shell. Guan rushed the now cocooned boy and grabbed him. With a great leap he went over the earth wall as the fire still roared beneath them. He used his massive strength and hurled the bone user past the Anbu, using the onto the group behind him. As Kimimaro got in range, his bone cocoon suddenly exploded, sending dozens of bone spikes everywhere, impaling most of the ninja before him. The Anbu that had been doing the stopped and moved to turn and help his comrades when Guan appeared before him and delivered 3 brutal punches to the man's chest, neck and face before delivering a savage roundhouse kick which snapped the man's neck in two as the former member of the 7 swordsmen removed his sword from his back, holding it in a ready stance as more of the ninja charged him. Jinchiko stood surrounded by her opponents, sword held in a ready position as she scanned over the group around her. Suddenly, dynamic entry. 4 ninjas suddenly flew over the woman, and the spandex-wearing green beast of Konoha appeared behind her. Standing back to back with the Kiri ninja, he flashed his signature smile that managed to blind some of their opponents. Do not worry, my fair Jinchiko, I will protect you with my life. She didn't have time to dwell on her rescuer's strangeness, though, as the ninja surrounding them charged. She twirled her sword once, catching one of the ninja in the eye as Guy kicked another of their opponents, with a solid straight kick. She followed up with a spinning movement, in which she elbowed one ninja in the gut, making the man lean forward. Guy used him as a springboard to do a split kick, catching two ninja that were approaching behind her in the face with enough force to shatter their face masks. As she sliced the neck of the ninja, she hit with a clean swipe of her sword. She formed a quick series of hand seals, slamming her palm down on the floor where a small circle of yellow lightning shot up around her. The compressed shockwave of the attack was enough to knock down two ninja that rushed her, but not enough to disturb Guy as the man delivered an expert drop kick onto another man's skull, possibly crushing his head down into his spinal column. Jinchiko saw two more Umbu approaching him with their swords drawn. "Hey!" she called the Leaf. He snapped his attention to her as she threw him the sheath of her sword. He caught it deftly, and as soon as his feet touched the ground, he spun around, smashing the wooden club-like weapon into the face of one Umbu before turning and with two quick movements knocked away another one's blade and hit him over the head with enough force to give him a concussion before shifting the weapon in his grip and held it so it went up to his elbow, and cocking his arm back, he smashed the end of the wooden weapon into the center of the man's upper body, right into his solar plexus. Two more were coming up behind him, and he ran forward, away from them and towards Jinchiko as she stabbed another ninja in the stomach. She noticed him coming, and leaving her blade impaled in the man's stomach, rushed towards him. He lowered himself so he was almost hunching, and she leapt on his back, before making another acrobatic leap, taking out two kunai as she twirled in mid-air with the expertise of a long-time gymnast as she landed between the two Umbu behind Guy and threw the two kunai, which pierced them both at the sides of their head, right where the temples were. Guy skidded on his knees to her sword, arching himself backwards so he went under it, and grabbed the blade as he passed, before placing both his hands over his shoulders so they toughed the ground, and pushed himself up in something akin to a spinning break-dancing move, kicking one ninja twice in the face before he raised the hand gripping the sword in his spin and slashed him across the stomach before he flipped to his feet. He turned to Jinchiko as she stood and offered another bright smile. Naruto ducked and weaved, avoiding three quick slashes delivered by Kenpachi as the Taki leader wielded his Naginata with the experience, precision, and speed of a man who knew his weapon. The blonde Jinchuriki seized an opening and delivered a fast kick which sent the man skidding back. Naruto had no time to continue as the Kusa leader Zaraki quickly took the man's place, forming his hand seals. He yelled out, "Raiten! Hekareki no Dagon!" before many small lightning bolts began to shoot out from his palm and fingers. Naruto quickly dodged and weaved out of the way as he formed his own hand seals. "Katon Gokakyu!" he yelled as he breathed out a large stream of fire, making the man cease his attack and leap back. The blonde heard the slight shift in the air and raised his hand in time to block one of Yoshino's chain whips. The metal weapon wrapped around his armored wrist and forearm as she formed some more hand seals. Sure no. Naruto looked down and saw the grass grow beneath his feet and wrap around his legs and free arm. He grunted as he tried to struggle free. Focusing some more, he realized that this was nothing more than a genjutsu. Just then, Guan and Zaraki appeared in front of him, at a distance of about 30 feet of him, each forming different hand seals. They had too many layers, he wouldn't be able to undo it in time. As if to accentuate his discovery, his other two opponents finished their hand seals and each called out, "Katan, Ryoka no Jutsu. Futon, Hidofuki no Ken." The two attacks merged, forming an even more powerful fire dragon. It was so hot he could actually feel the burn from a distance of almost 20 feet. He grit his teeth and snarled as his eyes flashed beneath his hood. Thinking fast, he gripped the whip that held his arm in place and sent wind chakra into it. Yoshino, noticing the immediate difference in the feel of her weapon, released her grip and leapt back just as the whip was sliced to ribbons. Now with his hand free, Naruto lowered it until it was almost down to his calf. Charging up as much wind chakra as he possibly could, he reared back his hand, and when the dragon was only about 10 feet away, he punched with a hard uppercut motion, creating a huge gust of wind which diverted the flames above him. Even so, they burned off his hood, just a testament to how close he had come at that time. He was lucky. Wind may not be able to beat fire, but it could divert it. Before he had a chance to undo the illusion, however, Kenpachi charged him. The man, for his size, was definitely very fast. Naruto moved to unsheath his swords, which he had sheathed before due to an exchange of, but before it was even halfway out of the sheath, Kenpachi slammed into him with the strength of a bulldozer. Naruto coughed and gasped for air, and heard two distinct snaps, indicating that two of his ribs indeed did break from the no doubt chakra-empowered blow. When Kenpachi stopped, Naruto kept moving, his back skidding against the earth, kicking up dust before he managed to flip over to a kneeling position, his claws digging into the ground as another gripped his chest, over the now broken ribs. The three coalition leaders looked around the battlefield, watching as their men fell to powerful ninjas like Kakashi, and 2 of the 7 swordsmen. Zaraki called to his army. Fall back! Fall back! Naruto snarled, standing as he glared at Yoshino and Kenpachi. The woman avoided his hateful gaze as Kenpachi met it, this time with eyes that may have even been slightly apologetic before they each began to run back to the fortress of Nanao. Naruto snarled, and his generals soon appeared before him. Orders, sir? Guan questioned as he shifted his one remaining eye to him. Naruto's eyes narrowed, cold fury shone through brightly now that everyone could see his features as they were not obscured by the hood. However, Kakashi and Guan caught another emotion in his eye, one that came and went so quickly they wondered if they had ever even seen it at all. When his voice came out, it was cold, flat, but a dangerous undertone of anger was laced in there as well. I want this place burnt to the ground by nightfall. As the heavy iron and wooden gates slammed shut with a great boom, Kenpachi turned and with a swift punch nailed Zaraki right in the face, sending him slamming into a stone wall. You fool! The Taki leader roared, losing his normally level-headed composure as Kusa Ninja and Umbu appeared between himself and their downed leader. Why the hell did you do that? Zaraki waved off his men as he slowly stood, a small crack going along the eye of his dragon mask. I did what I felt was right. He had let his guard down, and I attacked. That boy, Kenpachi growled. Never lets his guard down. This isn't like any enemy you've ever faced before. He is a force of nature, possibly one of the few living natural disasters if he so choose to be, and now our only hope for our men's survival you have squandered on your foolish overconfidence. If I hadn't attacked, he would have killed Yoshino and then attacked us regardless. Zaraki roared back with equal ferocity. You don't know that for certain, Kenpachi said as his lips settled into a thin, grim line. And what do you do? He shot back. Yes, came the voice of their forgotten comrade as she spoke up, looking at Zaraki through angered eyes. He may have killed me, but I know for a fact that if he did so he wouldn't have attacked our men. And you base this on what? The fact that you seem to have known him at some point? Thanks, Lady Yoshino. The title was spit out with much sarcasm. But your opinions matter little since the both of you failed to mention that you had some kind of personal history with this boy. That is irrelevant at this point. Kenpachi spoke forcefully. Right now, our only hope is to attempt to appease Naruto-san again. This time, only myself and Yoshino will go with our men, you stay here. He practically snarled the last order as he turned back to the gate. As he was about to yell to the gate guard to open the gate, Zaraki unsheathed his blade and pointed it at him. You're not going anywhere. He snarled out as Taki and AIM Ninja unsheathed their weapons. What would be the point of keeping us here, Zaraki? Yoshino spoke calmly from her place, making the Kusa leader point his sword at her. For all I know, this could have all been some elaborate plot by the 2 of you and that kid. Now you expect me to calmly let you guys walk out of here with your men so that he can take you all in and then attack just me and my Kusa ninja? What the hell, do you think I'm stupid? You're a delusional fool. She shot back, narrowing her eyes as she fingered her remaining whip. Zaraki snarled before Kenpachi spoke. Calm yourselves, both of you. Zaraki then pointed his blade at him. Shut up, old man. None of you are leaving me and my men here to die, even if I have to kill you all myself. Kenpachi narrowed his eyes. Put that weapon away, boy, before you hurt yourself. Several hours later, Naruto, already healed from the light injuries he received in the previous skirmish, sat in his tent, his mind going over the short reunion, if it could be called such, as he rested his head on his fist, blonde spiky hair framing his features and shadowing his eyes from view as the bracers glowed with red chakra and hissed eerily from his wrists. When one of the Chunin entered his tent, Naruto was surprised at what he said. Naruto-sama, Nanao's gates are opening again. The bracer's misty glow faded as he turned his eyes onto the Chunin, who pointedly avoided his gaze as he bowed. He swiftly stood, nearly knocking his chair back before he walked around the man and out of the tent. The sun was already setting and the men were scrambling to their battle positions, no doubt because of this latest development. So they have not made any move at all since the gates opened? Naruto found himself questioning Kakashi as the man stood next to him. The silver-haired shook his head. Not one. It's strange, but I don't even see their men on the walls. Naruto grunted before he turned into a Chunin. Bring me one of the Hyuga, a strong one with good range with his Byakugan. The man hastily bowed and rushed off. Kakashi turned his visible eye onto his blonde commander. For the last few hours, the only real topic of conversation among both the generals and the soldiers was simple. What was Naruto's history with the Taki and AIM leaders? Indeed, it was a question that plagued even him, and he usually didn't give a flying fuck about other people's histories. He was hesitant to speak on it. Hell, who wouldn't be? He was arguably facing one of the most dangerous ninja in the world, and questioning this ninja on an apparently sensitive aspect of his past. A few minutes passed in which the silence around them became almost oppressive, during which time Kakashi managed to gather his courage and was about to open his mouth to speak when. You summoned me, Naruto-sama? Damn it. Naruto turned to a Hyuga clan member that had been brought, and nodded before he pointed to the fortress. Tell me, what do you see? In silent understanding, the man nodded and activated his Byakugan. After a brief moment, confusion and surprise graced his features. They're kneeling? He squinted, trying to get a better look. What do you mean? Naruto questioned. I mean just that. All the ninja are kneeling, weapons laying in front of them? They're unarmed, sir, and I see no ninja that could be hidden in the buildings or genjutsu. Naruto's eyes narrowed in suspicion. Kakashi shifted his eyes back to Naruto before he spoke. What are your orders? The blonde's features are visibly tightened. Assemble your men, Kakashi. We're moving in. Be ready for anything. The copy ninja inclined his head before he vanished in a swirl of leaves. It was only about 20 minutes later that Naruto found himself standing in front of the open gates. Dozens of leaf ninjas stood behind him, all tensed and ready to fight at a mere moment's notice. He could see from his place outside the gates that ninja were indeed kneeling, all of them at the edges of the streets within the walled city, their weapons, armor, masks, scrolls, and other ninja accessories, all laid out in front of them, as if they were offerings. At his hand signal, several dozen Chunin climbed over the wall, receiving no resistance as they did so. Bounding over it, and securing the gate master as they did so, the wall itself also had a few ninja there, but they too were all kneeling with their equipment in front of themselves. All clear. He heard one of the Chunin shout from the top. The blonde nodded before he craned his neck back to glance at Kakashi and Guan. Be ready for anything. The two nodded before they collectively marched into the gate, half a dozen Anbu behind them with Jounin standing behind them as more Chunin began climbing the walls. As soon as they entered the courtyard, his and Chunin moved with uncanny efficiency as they confiscated the weapons in front of the kneeling ninja. However, Naruto was concerned mostly with the stench of fresh blood and death that surrounded the area. After a moment, he realized that the only ninja kneeling before him were from Taki and AIM. No Kusa ninja. Was it possible that there was dissension among the ranks? It would have been a foolish move, but not entirely unheard of. It was why most large alliances fell apart as well. Once things got crazy, everyone was continually blaming each other for the misfortune and ended up turning on each other. As he snapped his blue eyes onto the kneeling ninja closest to him, he walked forward with heavy, deliberate steps, wrinkling his nose in annoyance at the scent of fear that suddenly spiked in the air. He reached down and grabbed the man by the collar of his shirt before he hauled him to his feet. Where are they? Immediately the man knew who he was referring to and spoke with a slight stutter. The city shrine. His lips thinned at that. Every walled city, even Konoha itself, had a place of prayer near the center of the village. It was meant as an outlet for ninja, seeing as many in this line of work occasionally turned to their faith as an outlet to handle the pressures of their life. He unceremoniously dropped the ninja before he turned and began making his way towards the shrine, Kakashi and Guan following silently as the ninja continued to confiscate weapons from the kneeling Taki and AIM ninja. As they walked forward, the smell of blood and death became so strong even Kakashi could smell it. It was then that he noticed many bodies lying on the side of the road, each lined up and covered with a long cloth, the Kusa headband resting above it, some more from Taki and Iwa, as there had been dissension among the ranks then. He noticed many other injured Kusa ninja lined up on the other side of the street, for guards set around them, the only AIM and Taki ninja with their weapons still present. As the Konoha Umbu appeared, they hastily bowed and began disarming themselves as the huddled prisoners watched on with unveiled disgust. Finally, he reached a circular courtyard with 5 streets that served as its entrances and exits. A large open temple was all the way at the end of the circular courtyard, where he could faintly see 2 silhouettes kneeling before the large gold statue within the temple. As Naruto stepped forward, he paused before turning to Kakashi and Guan. "No matter what happens, do not interfere." Kakashi gave him a reproachful look. "What are you planning for Naruto?" Naruto snarled as his fists clenched tightly. "Do not question me, Hatake." He snapped at the older man, making the copy ninja take a step back. The boy then turned and with heavy strides made his way to the temple. As his footsteps echoed loudly in the eerily empty courtyard, Naruto couldn't help the sharp pang that went through his chest as he drew closer and closer, passing the wooden beams that held up the roof in the place of walls without a second glance as he approached the 2 kneeling figures. His 2 comrades. His allies. His betrayers. His enemies. As he came to a stop, his final footsteps seemed to echo from the pillars that held up the temple. He watched as Kenpachi bowed to the statue again before he slowly lit some incense on one of the many candles laid out before him before he placed it in its proper place. "This seems familiar, does it not, Naruto-san? All 3 of us here standing side by side again." "Enough, Kenpachi," he growled at the pious man. "What are your intentions?" The older man sighed as he slowly stood, picking up his naginata as he did so, Yoshino following his example after a brief moment. When they turned to face him, he could see their veiled sadness, the silent apology in their eyes, and the regret in their souls. They knew, and he knew that they knew, that at this point, he would not accept their surrender. He would not pardon or disregard their betrayal. "We decide this through battle, you against us. If we win, then you leave Taki and Aim. You'll leave us alone, and we shall leave you alone. If you win, you may have your revenge on us." "And why should I even accept these terms? My men already have your men captured and your cities under our control. You've already lost everything. I stand to gain nothing." Silence was his answer, an infuriating silence which angered him more than their very presence. He wanted to fight them, he wanted to accept their terms, and what was worse, they knew he wanted to do so. His eyes, those cold pits of ice that showed the equal coldness of his soul, bore into Kenpachi's own fiercely, glaring to him with fury rarely displayed. The older man returned his gaze calmly, almost as if with pity. That only raised his anger more. How dare he pity him? He was the most powerful man currently on the face of the earth. Both on and off the battlefield, he controlled 1/3 of the entire nation, and this fool was pitying him? He turned his eyes onto Yoshino, and she met his gaze with a strange look of pleading. But for what, he could not tell. Silently he unsheathed his blade, watching as Yoshino and Kenpachi hesitantly fingered theirs. "Naruto-san, please return home. This is not what Sarutobi-sama would have wanted," Kenpachi pleaded with the blonde Jinchuriki. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he growled. "Silence, Kenpachi, you know nothing of what you speak." However, due to the uncharacteristic display of anger, Kenpachi knew that he had hit a sore point. "You do a grave dishonor to Naruto-san. I know that a man as benevolent as Sarutobi-sama would never want this. He would never want so much death and destruction to fall upon the world." "Enough!" the blonde roared as his chakra exploded outwards. Both Kenpachi and Yoshino noticed, however, the faint red hue around him that pulsed, flickering as if barely restrained from its escape. Both the Aim and Taki leader's eyes widened at the realization he cannot control the bijou. Suddenly the blonde vanished in a black blur, and the 2 had to momentarily struggle to find him before Kenpachi spun around, placing his naginata in front of him in time to block Naruto's scimitar. He grabbed the blonde's wrist and twisted. Naruto grunted before he punched the man with 2 quick jabs to the face. Yoshino appeared with his side chain whip already lashing out to his throat. With his free hand he unsheathed his second sword, letting the chain whip wrap around it before he threw it to one of the wooden pillars, nailing it several inches into the hard wood. Kenpachi then twisted his arm even further, making Naruto drop his blade. The blonde then delivered a strong downward elbow to the man's forearm, making his grip slacken. The blonde leapt back as he swung the naginata in a horizontal arc. As soon as his feet touched the floor, he ran to the side, throwing kunai and shuriken, as Kenpachi and Yoshino both ran in opposite directions, returning his attacks. The cloak that trailed behind him receiving numerous tears, slashes and puncture holes as it grazed his skin and armor. He caught the glint of steel from the corner of his eye as his discarded sword glinted from the floor. He leapt up, and leaping from one pillar to another, never pausing in his attacks of kunai or shuriken as his two opponents ran at his side, having noticed his objective. They each ducked, dodged and weaved, twirling in the air, blocking counter-attacking as they continued their run. Yoshino threw a kunai. Naruto noticed it, but realized that if he dodged, he would lose the momentum he had built up, and would never reach the blade before either Kenpachi or her. If he continued forward, however, he would get hit in either the throat or the shoulder if he went fast enough. If so, then his arm would be useless until he could pull the weapon out and heal the injury. Deciding to risk it, he pumped chakra into his legs and lunged, ignoring the sting of the blade as it pierced his armor and dug deeply into the flesh, scraping the bone with the very tip. He extended his right arm forward and with a swift roll he grabbed his blade and got to his knees, but wasn't able to do more as Kenpachi appeared behind him, attacking with his naginata in a downward swing. The blonde placed the sword across his back. A loud clanging sound reverberated in his ears as Yoshino appeared in front of him. With a kick already aimed at his face, he ducked his head as low as possible. Her foot grazed the top of his skull before it came in contact with the back of his sword. Naruto snarled as he craned his neck over and shoved the kunai down, and out of his shoulder with the metal of his mask, the sharp blade cutting his shoulder wide open before gravity let it simply fall. In reality, he had probably done more damage pulling it out than when it got in. He felt Yoshino shift beside him before he snapped his eyes up to her and managed to catch sight of her chain whip before it latched around his throat. A strangled snarl escaped his lips as she pulled, the small blades on the whip pricking his skin as the whip tightened. He felt a small feeling return to his arm with mustering all of his willpower, moved his half-functional arm and unhooked his cloak, letting the chain blade take the red cloth as it had grasped it more than him. Then, turning, he managed to kick Kenpachi's legs, making the man stumble enough so he could roll forward and get to his feet. Turning quickly, he barely managed to stop Kenpachi's next swing. Even so, the weight of the weapon and strength of the attack still sent him skidding back until he hit one of the pillars. He grunted before he rolled to the side in time to dodge another swing which dug almost halfway into the thick wooden beam. He came back this time swiping at the man's midsection. However, because his weapon was lodged in quite well, he was forced to scoot back, thus releasing his weapon altogether. Naruto then followed up with a brutal uppercut which sent the large man sprawling onto his back. He stepped forward, but just then, Yoshino appeared in his path, her bladed whip transformed into its sword-like state as she attacked with quick, light strikes. He slashed at her with his claws, making the woman roll to the side, but as she did so, Naruto reared back his leg and delivered a brutal kick which connected solidly with her ribs. Her air left her as a single loud crack reached her ears as she was sent flying down the length of the temple. She grit her teeth against the pain and reformed her whip blade back into a whip before she swung to one of the pillars using a slingshot-like maneuver. Naruto found the woman flying towards him this time. Before he could form a proper defense, her foot slammed right in the center of his chest, completely knocking the wind right out of him. Yoshino panted and groaned in pain as she hit the floor, Kenpachi appearing at her side. "Yoshino!" he called worriedly before a rush of chakra caught both their senses before a virtual wall of fire erupted from the place Naruto had been thrown to, spreading flames throughout the whole temple. Yoshino ignored the pain in her chest and appeared in front of Kenpachi, her hands already going through seals. "Suetun, Sujin Hiki!" she yelled, spitting out a large stream of water from her mouth. When the flames hit, the water boiled and hissed as steam rose into the air. She sighed in relief when the flames died down. It was short-lived, however, as with a battle cry Naruto slashed through her wall with a wind-empowered blade. Her eyes went wide, but she was only able to catch a blur of black before something hit her in the side of her head, sending her to the floor in a daze. Naruto attacked Kenpachi, claw and sword flashing with steel as the larger man struggled with his blocks. Without his weapon he was quickly losing ground and he would never be able to hold the pace the attacks were coming for too long. Just then, as if waiting for his fall in confidence, an attack made it through. Yoshino regained her senses and scrambled to her feet, and turned, but only in time to see Naruto's blade cleave a bloody, gruesome gash from Kenpachi's left collarbone, down to his right hip. Blood poured from the wound like a waterfall, coating the ground crimson as the man stumbled back, the flames dancing, taunting, laughing around him. Reaching a pillar, he slid down, the blood quickly pooling beneath him as his breaths came in shallow pants and short gasps for breath. "No!" she heard herself scream as she moved to rush to the man's side. But a black blur was the only warning she had before a kick connected with her side, sending her to the floor in a heap, skidding several feet. She coughed up blood as she got to her hands and knees. Gripping her chest as pain raced through her body, she looked up into the emotionless eyes of her opponent and felt her anger rise. They had fought, but their hearts had never been in it. They had never wanted this fight. This was a fight they had to take. It was their responsibility as leaders of their village. They had never wanted this, and every time they had hurt him or hit him, she felt a pang go through her. She had felt pain with each blow she inflicted on him, and she was sure Kenpachi felt the same way. But he didn't feel anything, did he? He had just cut him down with a merciless air, and didn't even bat an eyelash. How could he? This monster. With a cry of rage and pain, the young woman shot to her feet and rushed him. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at her speed. She had not been that fast before. He raised his sword as her chain whip clicked back into place, taking its bladed form as she visibly prepared to swing. She streaked past him. As Naruto turned around, he heard a cry, before a fully formed water ball technique slammed into his side, making him stumble back several steps. As he struggled to regain his balance, he saw her charging again. He dug in his heels and turned swiftly, his blade flashing as he swung, only to have her do a somersault over both the attack and himself. He placed the blade across his back to block a swing she delivered in midair. She landed and immediately spun around, delivering a sweep kick which practically knocked his feet straight out from under him. She got to her feet and tried a downward swing, only to have Naruto flip to the side and quickly take a defensive position as she continued her furious attack. He blocked a downward swing with his blade, however, using strength he never knew her to possess. She practically shoved his blade down, leaving him open for a follow-up attack. As she leapt up and delivered 3 swift kicks to his chest, he grunted in pain before he leapt back to get some distance between himself and his opponent. He had been caught completely blindsided by her increase in strength. Just what had happened? Was it perhaps Kenpachi's death? Could she have gained the same kind of strength Jinchiko gained when Hidetada died? Whatever it was proving to be troublesome, very troublesome. She rushed him, her form streaking towards him in a blur of black, blue, and white. His eyes widened before he raised his blade again, exchanging a quick series of blows in midair before they both landed on one of the pillars. Fighting parallel to the ground as they stuck to the wood with chakra, he continued to step back, up to the roof as her attacks continued to come at a very fast pace, one that he was having a difficult time keeping up with. She screamed in rage and her pace increased. Naruto's eyes went wide as even her strength seemed to increase, the jewel at her neck activating and glowing fiercely, the stored chakra being unleashed. Her attacks were becoming erratic in her anger, but he could not bring himself to seize the openings in her attacks as she swung at him with an almost animalistic fervor. Finally, one strong swing made him stumble slightly. The momentary delay was enough as she slashed at his chest, the wound going from the right side of his chest up to his right shoulder. He grunted in pain, but his surprise was visible for all to see as the woman vanished and reappeared behind him, her leg coming down in a brutal axe kick which slammed against the small of his back. Naruto barely bit back a roar of pain as he was sent slamming into the wooden floor, making it crack and break beneath the force of his impact. He growled as he felt the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He rolled onto his back, but as he did so, Yoshino suddenly fell on top of him, one knee in his stomach, the other foot stomping down on his wrist as she loomed over him, her blade glinting as she prepared to plunge it into his heart. His free hand shot up and latched around her throat, but with an angry cry she grabbed onto his wrist and yanked him off, ignoring his claws as they cut her. Just a few more centimeters and he would have slashed out her jugular. She looked into his eyes and he into hers. Her eyes were grief-stricken, torn, tears glimmering over the orbs. But she held them back as she always did, glaring into his eyes fiercely. He could see her. He could see her trying to gather her anger, her pain, her hatred for him, but she couldn't. It slipped through her fingers like sand. Her features twisted, and with a strangled sob, her weapon fell from her grip, clattering to the floor as her tears fell with it. She stumbled off of him, before she slumped against one of the pillars. Something within himself twisted painfully at the sight. She had never openly cried before, she had always hidden her tears, her grief, her anger and her pain, she had always hidden them, or masked them. He had driven her to this, and while a part of him said that he should not care, that it was inevitable, another part couldn't help but to care. He sat up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder and back as he walked up to her sitting form as she cried. He didn't know what to do. He had never had any such experience with anyone and was at a complete loss. After a brief moment of hesitation, he spoke. Yoshino. Her sobs slowed before she looked up to him, her pain and hurt, evident for him to see within her brown orbs. She looked into his eyes, those blue eyes that still showed only apathy as they looked upon her. As she looked in deeper, however, she noticed something there, something that wasn't there before. Tell me why. Silence was his only answer as she averted her gaze. Yoshino. He snarled. Answer me, tell me why. She stood slowly, her form shaking slightly from the pain that racked her small form. When she spoke, her voice was choked and heavy. Tell me why you accepted our challenge. A heavy silence descended upon the two of them. Look at me, he spoke, breaking the silence with his commanding tone. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she looked up to his eyes and gasped. There she found something she thought she would never see within those blue orbs. However, before she could properly identify it, the shifting of a figure behind him brought her out of her musings. It was Akusa Chunin. The man had managed to hide away in the shrine during the earlier confusion and had remained there, hoping to last long enough so as not to be caught. However, with the ending of this fight, he could see an opportunity to both avenge Zaraki-sama's death and to gain personal glory. With the now distracted, he could strike. Removing a single kunai, he licked the nervous sweat off his upper lip before he let the metal projectile sail through the air, aiming for the junction of his skull and spinal cord for an instant kill. Yoshino's eyes widened in momentary panic. Her whole body tensed, she opened her mouth to scream, but no sound escaped her throat. Naruto heard the sound of the kunai approaching and turned his head back to look. He wouldn't be able to move quickly enough. Apparently the Chunin had subconsciously changed his chakra into its natural wind affinity, and though it was sloppy, it gave the kunai enough speed to get the job done. He saw a blur of blank and white before the sound of metal cutting into flesh reached his ears. He paused, his mind struggling to catch up with what he was seeing. She fell, collapsing against him. He acted immediately and took out 2 shuriken before throwing them with expert precision, nailing the Chunin once in the forehead and once in the throat. The man fell dead. Naruto then allowed his eyes to travel to Yoshino as the woman was held up in his arms. The kunai had struck deep in her chest, she wouldn't survive long. Already he could hear her slowly dying pulse and for once, felt a true, deep, sharp pain shoot through his chest as her shallow breaths reached him. He knelt down to the floor, gently lowering her as he moved his hand to grip the kunai in her chest when her small hand gripped his own, gently, weakly. Stop. She breathed out. It's already too late, you know that. She smiled, the corners of her eyes shining with unsheathed tears, but even so, you are still going to try, and that's all that really matters in the end. His silence was one that betrayed his confusion, his uncertainty. She slowly reached up, her hands shaking slightly as blood loss began to take its toll. Slowly, ever so slowly, she reached to the clamps of his mask and tried to undo them, but her strength failed her. As her hand began to fall away, he reached up and gripped hers in his. Pausing slightly at his action, he reached up and helped her undo the clasps, letting the metallic item fall to the floor with a dull clatter. She smiled softly up to him, caressing the jagged whiskers on his cheek as he stared down at her. I wish, she began as the tears fell from her eyes. Things could have been different maybe if we had never become the leaders of our village. She paused as she coughed up a small bit of blood, her breaths coming in more and more strained. Naruto, I am sore. Her hand on his cheek fell to the floor limply. After a brief moment of hesitation, he moved his hand to grip hers. She weakly squeezed his hand before her eyes drifted closed. He heard her heart cease in her chest. A ripping pain tore into him, growing and gnawing on his insides as he continued to look down on her as the flames continued to spread, to destroy, to consume, to create. And he could only wonder. Why? The next morning. Kakashi, Guan, Guy, Kimimaro, and several umbus shifted through the burnt and charred remains of the temple. Soot and ash covered their legs up to their knees as they searched through the remains. "Look there!" One of the umbu pointed, making the group turn into the direction he was pointing. They each rushed forward, finding Naruto's blonde form sitting among the ruins of the temple, a perfect circle of uncharred wood around him. He was looking upon a naginata stabbed into the ground. Wrapped around it was a chain whip of sorts. On the floor in front of him were some prayer beads and a butterfly necklace. "Naruto-sama?" Kakashi spoke up as he stepped forward. "Are you all right, sir?" A brief moment of silence before he spoke. "Kakashi, make preparations to return to your post in Kiri. Guy, you are to return to Konoha. Kimimaro, go and reinforce Ibiki and Anko." The three mentioned ninja bowed before they each vanished in a swirl of leaves. Guan, the last remaining general, hesitated for a brief moment before he spoke. "Naruto-san, what am I to do?" "Keep the men organized for now and simply hold your position." "Naruto-sama," he hesitated again. "What will you be doing?" The boy slowly looked up to the cloudy sky as it rumbled with thunder. "I'm going to wait." Confused by the cryptic answer, the former seven swordsman spoke up again. "For what, Naruto-san?" He saw the boy's eyes closed as he took a deep breath. He spoke, his voice was strained. "For the rain." 5 days later. Gaara sighed tiredly as he walked into his home. Again, more reports of Konoha Jinchuriki's victory. Every day his people lost even more hope, every day his ninja lost more morale and his village more money as jobs went to the now seemingly more powerful Konoha village, thus weakening Suna even further. He trudged up the stairs with heavy steps and slumped shoulders. He found this job to be more exhausting than a field mission where one couldn't sleep. As he passed Temari's room, he noticed her door was slightly open. Peering in, he found his sister sitting on the railings of her balcony, a worried frown on her features. Sighing tiredly, he walked in. "You should be asleep, Temari," he commented, making her jump a little. She looked back to him, then back to the full moon that hung from the sky. "I can't really sleep." "So you've heard too then?" he asked with a sigh. She nodded slowly. "It's worrying, Gaara," she whispered after a moment. He nodded slowly. "I know." Zhuge Liang silently observed as Akina practiced their meditation in the gardens. Yujito had been tutoring her long and hard on the proper way to draw out the power of A. The process was slow, but assured that they would have much more control over their actions than what they would otherwise. When she had been informed of her status as a Jinchuriki, she had been, predictably, shocked and had even at one point felt disgusted with herself that she actually shared something in common with the man she wanted to kill. But they had told her little else besides that, just that she was one of 2 children taken to seal the 9 tails and that she had held hers in secret to both protect her and act as a countermeasure should the first Jinchuriki get out of control, which truly at this point isn't far from the truth. It was manipulative of him, but it was a necessary evil, and one that had proven beneficial, for now, added to the drive of revenge, she also felt a sense of duty to defeat him. He saw the red chakra slowly form around her, taking the shape of a fox with a single tail as she struggled to draw it out by pure will alone. "By doing this, I may even sink lower than you, Naruto-san, however." The Raikage turned, walking down the darkened hallway as his eyes showed with his determination. "We must prepare for the coming storm, and our best defense is currently your own flesh and blood. Lord Yoshihiro, please be reasonable. We must move now. We must stop those leaf bastards before they gain even more momentum. We must avenge the disgrace we suffered at the hands of that bastard Yondaime." The IWA Umbu captain yelled, slamming his hands on the table that Tsuchikage was currently occupying with his nephew and his new girlfriend. Yoshihiro placed his bottle of sake back on the table before he addressed the man in a calm but dangerous tone. "Kanemayo, there is a time and a place for everything. And right now, I am celebrating the engagement of my nephew and his beautiful new fiancée. Most certainly not the time, nor the place for you to bring out your desires for war against the Leafs. We will discuss this tomorrow in my office, the proper place to do such a thing." "But sir..." "Leave Kanemayo." The man was visibly tense with his anger as he turned and stalked out of the sake house. "Uncle," Tohisa began warily. Are you certain? Please, if it is a pressing matter, then you should go. We understand, really. We can just postpone this until tomorrow or something. Yoshihiro smiled at his young nephew before he took another long draw of sake. Please, boy, I've been leading plenty of wars before, and believe me that after such a battle even the demon of Konoha will want a break. One day won't make much difference. If he can't wait, then that's his problem. Still, Tohisa said hesitantly. Don't you think you should take someone that's called the demon of Konoha seriously? I mean, you're not as young as you used to be. Yoshihiro snorted. Please, I'll take him seriously when I fight him. It's not the name that marks the skill of a person. I've faced demons, dragons, tigers, and all manner of named ninja, and more often than not, they're all talk. I'll say that he is a demon when he bests the devil Shimazu. Tohisa shook his head in slight dismay. Still going on about that name, eh? You never did tell us how you got it. Yoshihiro smirked before he leaned back in his chair, drinking more of his sake. Maybe someday. 5 months later. The Hokage Tower, as usual, was abuzz with activity as ninja of all kinds and ranks rushed up and down the halls, carrying messages, taking missions, giving out reports of successful or failed ones, and so on and so forth. However, all that activity came to a screeching halt as the lone familiar figure of Uzumaki Naruto entered the hallway. The reason was because the young boy before them was, but also was not, the same dark figure they had come to fear and respect in these last few months. In place of his blood-red robe was a white one, in place of tight armor and ninja pants was a set of a white silk hakama and haori, in place of the hood was a single straw hat with white silk wrapped over it. The red kanji for Hokage is painted onto the front. As he walked down the hall, many couldn't help but openly gape. Anyone would confuse him for a younger version of their late fourth. He reached his office and sat down on his chair. After a few moments, a woman hesitantly entered, placing a cup of tea in front of him as was customary for all the Hokage. Suzum. Naruto called out the assistant's name, making her heart leap into her throat. What is the first order of business? She stumbled over herself. Verifying the reports of recent missions. Naruto nodded. Very well, bring the reports in. She nodded and hastily left. Closing the door behind her, she struggled to catch her breath as her heart beat loudly in her chest. Slowly, a small smile formed on her lips. Perhaps the future won't be so bad after all. Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun with this epic what if as I did creating it. Make sure to smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single twist in the story. Drop your thoughts, theories, or even your wildest ideas in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're craving more awesome Naruto content, be sure to check out the other videos on the channel, because there's plenty more heat waiting for you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember, even a shadow clone needs love. Peace out.